Not something people care about necessarily.
I mean, the problem is, right, this whole rhetoric of the elites, right?
Yeah.
Oh, these elites, how dare you get educated? There's this entire anti-intellectual streak inside the right wing. And you know who it's led by? A whole bunch of people that were educated in the Ivy League.
Exactly right.
I mean,
exactly right.
Right. Where did they all go? Right. I mean, what does a Penn alumnus think of their alum? Right? You just wonder that all the time.
So one thing that is a voting issue, I hope we'd all agree, are deep Medicaid cuts. And this budget bill, tax cuts, huge deficits, Medicaid cuts, is sitting in the Senate.
By the way, this bill is one big, beautiful mess.
It is one big, beautiful mess, yeah.
It's just a mess.
Well, a lot of people didn't think that Mike Johnson, the speaker, could get 215 votes, 215 to 214. Yeah. What are the prospects in the Senate, and what are the prospects after the Senate makes changes of the two houses ever being able to come to agreement on a final bill to send to Trump?
Look, again, I go back to, I know what they're going to pass a bill. Now, what I don't know is whether we'll see it, just like, remember all the Sturm and drama with Biden's bill? Remember the big, beautiful bill, right? He had a version of this. What do they call it? Build Back Better?
Right.
And it blew up a couple of times. Oh, it's dead. It's not dead, right? Because at the end of the day, Joe Manchin wasn't going to tank Joe Biden's bill. I don't think Rand Paul's going to tank. Already you got Rand Paul. I'll vote for it if it was this, or I'd vote for it if it was this. Like, they're going to all support it. That doesn't mean it isn't painful. That doesn't mean it doesn't change a bunch. That doesn't mean that there aren't moments of, oh my God, it's dead. And then Trump makes the phone calls and they all, so they're going, I'll be honest, if I were watching this as a TV show, I'd fast forward through this part. Because I know they're going to pass something. Just tell me what ends up surviving. Do they get rid of the debt ceiling altogether? Right? I don't know if you saw Trump threw that out there again. And you know what? Yeah. He'd be doing all of us a favor. Sometimes Trump does stuff that he stumbles into something that's going to be better. Getting rid of that. How about cutting a deal with Iran? Right? Like, sometimes he stumbles into things that are net positives for us in the long term. And he may do that with the debt ceiling. So, but I refuse to believe this thing will ever die. But if you told me there were sort of moments of, like you're on a roller coaster, you went, oh my God, that was scary. That thing almost, I thought I was going to fall out of the roller coaster, and you're never going to fall out of the roller coaster.
So briefly, what's in your estimation, the Musk impact, whether it's motivated by, retribution because he's getting hurt as a business matter, maybe it's on the merits, he really cares about deficits, maybe it's ketamine, whatever it is, can he move a handful of votes?
I'm skeptical that he can. I really don't. I don't buy that he has a lot of sway. He's got he could put fear into people if he threatens financial retribution, but he doesn't seem to be doing that. He doesn't seem to have the motivation of that. I'm skeptical but I also think Trump's going to appease him. Trump always appeases rich people. Anybody who's got more money than him, he appeases them. Look at Jeff Bezos, look at Zuckerberg. He always will let them back into his circle. So Musk, I do think this was a test of wills a little bit, right? I think, Trump's decision to yank that NASA administrator felt to me like, hey, look, you screwed up Doge, and I'm just going to make sure you know it. Because Doge has been a failure. Right?
The proposed NASA administrator was Musk's guy, by the way.
Musk's guy. Yeah, and look, Musk still accomplished a lot by doing what he did. He got so many government entities off Tesla's back, off SpaceX's back. He cleaned, that to me was what he got out of it. Whether, I think he's costing the government money in the long term. And I think with all the stupid ways he probably illegally got rid of contracts that are going to get reinstituted. Some already have. The government's going to owe restitution. I mean, I promise you, in 5 years, we're going to redo the bill on Doge, and it's going to be like, oh my God, it cost the country money.
Yeah, but the thing you're leaving out, in all fairness, is from what I read, it's not, I haven't sourced it properly. In the time he was running Doge, he had 17 additional children, which is really incredible in such a short. One last.
Well, that increases Social Security.
One last legislative
if you get more people to pay into Social Security, maybe he just wants to help with
You know, we haven't asked you this question. I have no idea why, but now it's going to come to a head. 2 days ago or a day ago, Trump files this bill. I'm not quite sure why the rule requires it be acted upon in 45 days. We talked about it yesterday. Dumping George W. Bush's greatest accomplishment, in my mind, PEPFAR. This thing had saved tens of millions of lives. AIDS-related work.
This is the rescissions package that sort of would codify AID, sort of reverse codification of some of these early
and get rid of funding for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting.
But by the way, we are literally, you know what we're talking about? The amount of money compared to the federal budget, we're literally talking about $15.
Yeah.
We're the equivalent of like,
$9 billion, yeah.
Right. It's getting rid of a couple of subscriptions. It's the equivalent of. Right?
I go back and forth on what I think the prospects for our parents and PBS and NPR are, but we've never asked you, what do you think are the likelihood of the entity, CPB, surviving?
I think it survives in some form. I've often believed, and I know that while NPR is more of a punching bag at times than PBS is, NewsHour and things like that, I do think rural public radio is a lifeline in a lot of red districts.
It is.
So I do believe that you won't see full cutting because there is too much importance out there. The only place for crucial information in rural communities, whether it's on weather, farming stuff, just basic necessities. So I think this is one of those things where I feel like it's going to sound like he did a lot, and this will quickly be restored the minute Trump and the Republicans walk out the door. Well, and more solid. I'm less. I'm not saying there's going to be. I do think both PBS and NPR. I'd like to think that the leaders had an idea this was coming and were preparing, for different ways to run as sort of a more like an NGO and a little bit of a private nonprofit. But I think this is more rhetoric, and I think this is still restorable. Okay, maybe not in the next year, but probably in the next 5 years.
Chuck, Todd, I was listening, and reading stuff about the so-called, what Trump calls the big, beautiful bill. And you have this thing where Republicans didn't vote for any of Joe Biden's infrastructure stuff, but now, like down in Arizona, they really like these energy tax credits. I guess they got some big car company down there, and one of the House people was begging not to get rid of those, even though he ended up voting for the bill. Or you have a Josh Hawley and other people that are concerned about Medicaid because, they have a lot of constituents that are on Medicaid. I'm thinking, isn't it interesting? Lots of people want these things. They do want energy tax credits, because they're right here in Massachusetts. People's electricity bills are through the roof. We have, I think, 25% of electricity now is from clean energy, but we could get more, and the bills would eventually be cheaper. So, how the Republicans are getting rid of things that people wanted, and of course the Democrats will get rid of things that Republicans wanted, which brings me to your talking about third parties in Massachusetts in one of your recent, not Massachusetts, nationwide, one of your recent podcasts. Is there, most people like me think there's no chance, even though people are disgusted with both parties, of a third party. But what do you think?
I think there's going to be an openness to independent candidacies in the next couple of years. That doesn't mean, and I still believe that third parties serve as vehicles to reform the two major parties, right? Part of it is the duopoly that the two parties have over ballot access.
Yeah.
Right. If it wasn't for ballot access, I think both parties would be much more vulnerable to have lost they'd have one or both of them would have been replaced by another party as sort of major parties, right? Just like we've seen, we're watching in real time in the UK, right, where this Nigel Farage-led Reform Party is becoming the new right-wing party, displacing the Tories and the Conservatives, because there isn't the same, they don't have the same stranglehold over ballot access, right? So that is, if you're ever wondering why this is, it's that, right? It is if the Democrats and Republicans duopoly on ballot access, if they were an business that was regulated by the FTC, even Donald Trump's FTC, they would have been broken up and would have been told that they were a duopoly and they'd have to do business a different way. But that obviously the two parties are in charge, so that is what it is. But look at what's happening in the state of Michigan. You've got a former Democratic mayor of Detroit running as an independent, Mike Duggan. And he's basically saying, look, the best way to help Michigan is there's good ideas on the left, good ideas on the right. And I'm going to be a governor that tries to do both. Well, guess what? In new polling that I've seen that's really good polling, he's the only candidate with a positive favorable rating among Democrats, a positive favorable rating among independents, and a positive favorable rating among Republicans. The only candidate that is net positive in all three categories. So that means there is a desire out there, right? The two parties behave as if nobody wants anything from the other party. But as you just outlined about these tax credits, right? The reason why both Biden and Trump have created big, beautiful congressional messes is because neither one of them attempted bipartisanship.
Yeah.
Barack Obama, his Obamacare was a party line vote, but it wasn't a party line piece of legislation. He spent months courting Republicans. Republicans helped shape the bill. It was a Republican idea, right? Mitt Romney taking it from the Heritage Foundation of the 90s, back when it was not as Trumpy as it is today, because, that's how legislation works. That's how democracies are supposed to work. And, ever since, the 2016 election, Trump has worked only with one party. He's refused to reach out to Democrats. Biden didn't reach out to any Republicans, maybe one or two, but he wasn't serious about it. And certainly Trump isn't now. And this is why this is why these bills are a mess. And if you actually tried, there is large majorities for many of the things Trump wants. If he would actually, show himself to be open to working with all sides on here, because there is majorities for some of these things. If you could open the aperture, and this wouldn't be that hard, but they're all, it is this party line nonsense that we're stuck in, this polarization that if you support an idea, if a Republican shows up at a Democratic event because they think this idea is good, they're going to be kicked out of their party. And I think there's, in some corners, Democrats, if they get caught flirting with a Republican, they can get kicked out of their party. So we're just in a horrible death spiral here when it comes to political bipartisanship.
Yeah, we're talking to Chuck Todd, obviously. We only have a couple minutes left. Chuck, you did an interview with a British something or other in which you taled about how when...
they call themselves presenters. I love when they do that. She calls her, she's terrific, but she's a presenter. It's so funny. A British something or other. Okay. I love that. You know what?
What?
Your Irish friends will be happy that you said that. Well, goddamn it, you don't bow down any of these things.
So Maddie Hale is her name. My apologies. Yes. You're talking to her about how your tires are slashed after one of the many times Trump name called you during Trump 1.0. I'm interested in that, but I'm much more interested. You also told her that you spoke to Trump about it and the effect of his name calling. Can you spend a minute and tell us what those conversations were like?
Not about that. I didn't talk to Trump about the incident that happened.
No, but about name calling. I'm talking
about name calling. And I said, he thinks it's a net positive. He really did. Oh, isn't it? Because I always say Trump thought of this the way, if you were a fan of wrestling and the WWE and their fake, there was a guy who used to be the media punching bag for the WWF, WWE. His name was Mean Gene Okerlund, right? And he would be the guy that would interview, and these wrestlers would yell at him, "Shut up, Gene," like beat him up and all this stuff. And it was all an act. And I think Trump believed, because he would sit there and say, "Oh, isn't it good for your ratings when I do this to you?" And it's, it's good for their name recognition and so and so. And I'm like, but you single them out and you get these death threats. Look, my picture was on that ridiculous van of the guy that sent pipe bombs, right?
Oh.
And I had the FBI visiting my house at the time and saying, "Hey, just be careful opening the mail." I went, "Gee, thanks." I saw that I remember it was one of those, they were doing their due diligence, right? They're like, we know he did research on your house, so be careful. I'm like, yeah, I figured that out when I saw my face on his van. But it was like, again, it was sort of like, it was just, they had to just do their due diligence, and I get it. But I also didn't make a big deal of it at the time, right? And I've had people ask me why, and it's because I'm like, I wasn't, because the more you talk about it, the more you put a target on your back, right? So I wasn't interested in increasing the likelihood of that. And unfortunately, I've owned my house longer than I was a relevant person. What does that mean? I didn't put my house in some anonymous name, LLC or something like this. So you can find me quite easily. And I, get all sorts of mail. Most of it's pretty positive. to this day. In fact, most of the time, the mail I get now is in the 2014 Topps Allen and Ginter baseball card set. I have a baseball card in there, and people will send it to me, and I will sign it and send it back.
Oh.
But it's because my address is everywhere. There's no hiding it, unfortunately, with public records and things like that. But yeah, NBC security was terrific on this stuff, and they work with local law enforcement. I never felt, I was pretty ticked off that I had to go get new tires for my truck. It was my Avalanche. It was back when I owned my Avalanche. I missed my Avalanche.
Hey, Chuck,
we're going to describe him as relevant person next time we introduce him. I like that.
That's right.
Person.
Hey, we're out of time, but thank you so much.
Chuck, it's good to see you. Be well. Talk to you next week.
Got it, guys. Bye.
Okay, see you later. We were speaking with political analyst Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Toddcast, former moderator of NBC's Meet the Press, and soon to be host of a brand new show, Sunday Night with Chuck Todd, on the Newsphere. That's NOOS, Newsphere platform, starting in June. Thanks again to Chuck Todd. Coming up after a quick break, we're opening the phone and text lines. For all the outrage that many people feel about what Donald Trump is doing, why are we not taking to the streets? What are we doing to counter it? That's next. You're listening to BPR and GBH and NEPM, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Richard Russo. The writer is known for his novels, which have earned him a Pulitzer and legions of dedicated readers. Now, in a departure, he has published a collection of essays titled Life and Art, exploring the relationship between the two. Plus, director Igor Goliak, founder of Arlekin Players Theater, reviews his latest production, examining the horrors of anti-Semitism, complicity, and betrayal. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Now on view, Van Gogh, the Rouland Family Portraits, featuring Van Gogh's portraits of the Rouland family and the deep bonds of friendship behind them. More at mfa.org. And the Vermont Cheese Council, host of Vermont Cheese Week, September 6th through 13th, offering tastings and pairings, farm tours, and outdoor dinners in and around Vermont. Learn more at vtcheese.com.
Welcome back to BPR on NEPM and GBH. Marge Regan and Jim Browder is streaming at youtube.com/GBH. News live at the library tomorrow with our media analysis panel. Press play. If you listen to the show, you know how Margie and I feel about a lot of what comes out of Washington. Last 24 hours, travel bans again. Harvard can't have international students again. Columbia University may lose its accreditation. ICE raids sweeping up people, including honor students who are in high school in Massachusetts. But until the top of the hour, we're not going to talk about Trump. We're going to look in the mirror and talk about us. For people who are troubled by what's going on in this country, and some of us are troubled by what we consider to be existential threats, why is it that generally our fiercest response is a letter to Congress, a few hand-wringing, hair-on-fire editorials, some bombastic posts on X and Blue Sky? We know June 14th demonstrations are coming, no kings, but it's taken a long time. We're not disparaging them, but it's taken a long time, and it's one day. In other democracies in this world, slights far less great than this. Hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets in a matter of hours. What is up with us? And by the way, if you're a Trump supporter, welcome you to do an analysis of why the unhappy Americans are so passive, and we are. The number's 877-301-8970. Why aren't we more active in our resistance or opposition to things that we find to be deeply troubling? What do you think the answer is?
Well, I don't know what the answer is, but there were a couple of theories in some of the stuff I read this morning, and one of them was kind of a depressing theory, is that we're in denial in the United States of America, like in many ways we were in World War II, thinking that we have the Atlantic on one side and the Pacific on the ocean on the other side, that we're sort of safe from the turmoils of Western Europe.
People still believe that?
No, let me finish. That what we have not seen totalitarianism. We have not had soldiers soldiers march
I
across
see.
our country like the Polish did in World War II. We didn't have the Nazis, Jim. We didn't have authoritarianism. We have not experienced what people in Europe have, and so we're sort of in denial. And a lot of us think things are okay so far, that we can. It's not that bad so far, and that's one of the big reasons. I think there might be something to it. We have not experienced authoritarianism until now.
I don't buy that at all. I mean,
Okay.
no, that we haven't experienced authoritarianism. Yes, look at polls, listen to our calls, listen to. I'm not suggesting it's a vast majority. It's probably roughly half the country, but those half who do feel that you and I think some of these things are existential threats.
Okay.
People who share our point of view, we're not exactly. I don't mean you and I.
So give me
but
your theory then.
I don't really. I think
You have none.
I don't. I don't. I think it is so troubling. I mean, look, in France and Germany, against these far-right parties, people out in the streets, up until October 7th, in Israel, over judicial reform, I'm not saying it's not important, but over judicial reform, there are hundreds of thousands of people out on the street weekly for, I think it was 29 weeks, and it obviously ended on October 7th. 29 weeks, hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets over judicial reform. Where are we?
Well, the other thing is Israel's a very small country. You know, if we were like a little tiny place, then maybe everybody being out in that little tiny place, we have 50 states and we're very spread
Well, how
out.
about in our individual states?
Well, look at this. There's all these rallies planned up, and we're broadcasting in Westbury, Massachusetts.
One day.
Where they're
It's
going to be
great.
all over the place up
One
there.
day.
Northampton, Williamstown,
One day.
Stockbridge, Great Barrington. Jake in Beverly, thank you for calling. Jim has
Welcome,
no
Jake.
answers, but he's
I don't.
criticizing all of ours.
I am, exactly. Hi, Jake. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Yes, I just wanted to say I think one of the major differences between America and the rest of the world is our use of social media. Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses. I think that's changed today, that social media is the opiate of the masses. We're fed the information that we want to hear. We are fed our little bubbles, and I think a lot of people are convinced that instead of going out on the streets, all they have to do is post a meme or post something in their Instagram story, and that's going to make all the difference.
You know, that is a theory that I think a lot of people have espoused. I think there's something to that.
Well, part is
I'm going to tweet about it.
No, but in all seriousness, social media is huge in other parts of the world, not just in democracies, Jake. So I don't know enough to know if it's bigger here per capita than it is elsewhere, but it's not just America, not just the United States that embraces it, but we'll see if people agree with you. Thanks for your call. We appreciate it.
You know, Andrea in New Hampshire has a theory, and I think this is part of it. Why don't major news outlets post the demonstrations front and center? That'll help the movement. We only see a few on social media. Should be front page and top stories every time. We had this demonstration just a few weeks ago in Boston. Estimates were like 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 people. I was down there covering it. It was so packed you couldn't even walk. Yeah. It was not really covered. It's this huge thing. You know who covers the demonstrations all the time on television? Rachel Maddow. I see her stuff on MSNBC when they're saying demonstration here, demonstration there.
Yeah, you get them covered if you're relentless. We are not relentless.
Well, I mean, how much of a big deal do we make out of that demonstration?
I read about the demonstrations back in Israel almost every day. We're reading about in this country.
In our media.
I understand. No, in our media.
That's
I'm talking
Andrea's
about.
point. We don't cover it big in our media. And the Women's March was the biggest march we ever had. And that got some coverage, but didn't get that much.
Elaine in New Hampshire. Hi.
Hi, guys. Love you.
Thanks.
As always.
Thanks.
My thing is, Rachel gets it, and she reports it.
Yeah, she does.
And she does a lot of very, right in there, all the states. I've been to 2 Not My President rallies up here in Hampshire.
Hampshire.
So all you have to do is you have to get online, you have to sign up. I'm going to one in Peterborough on the 14th. Thank you very much. So, I get it. People need to pay attention. I'm too scared to not pay attention, but I don't know I don't know if people are going to get scared or they're just going to stay home and lock their doors and put their AC on. I have no idea.
Your line, I'm too scared to not pay attention, is the line of the day. It's early. We'll see what happens in the next couple hours, but that is a beautiful expression. Elaine, thank you much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay, we got a couple of texts. Anonymous texter, I'm a mom with 2 jobs. My bandwidth only allows me to do what I can, and I am outraged. I write lots of letters, call my elected officials, but above all, I feel unsafe at large protests and gatherings. I'm not willing to put my life in danger in the name of Trump. Now, I don't know if that means that they're afraid of getting arrested. I think generally demonstrations are pretty safe, and we don't have time for the next one, but we're going
to get back to it in a minute.
We'll get back to it in a second. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to continue talking about this to the top of the hour. Why do we tweet about our outrages? Why are we sitting on our behinds? Why aren't we not taking to the streets more? Why aren't we protesting if we're so upset about what is going on in this country? You're listening to Boston Public Radio and NEPM. We're going to be right back after a quick break. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. 877-301-8970, the number to call or text.
Human rights NGOs have found widespread evidence of abuse of migrants in programs funded by the EU, and they say the European Commission already knows about it.
The Commission is kind of closing their eyes. I would simply call it as a denial.
That story and the day's top global news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Benchmark Senior Living. Benchmark's Mind and Memory Care program is committed to instilling dignity and independence for residents by offering personalized care plans, working at every resident's pace. Locations and more at benchmarkseniorliving.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Live at the library tomorrow. No tickets or RSVP required. Fabulous music tomorrow. Just spectacular performers from Lights on the Piazza. Okay, so we've turned on our allies. We've embraced authoritarianism around the world. We turned over our government to a drug-addled billionaire. We are upending the Constitution. I can go on and on, screwing small businesses with these tariffs, and our response is essentially to whine to each other, and we're really glad we do, on radio shows, to tweet, to complain to our partners, etc., while the rest of the world rises up at the smallest. We mentioned, how many years ago was it? Was it Montreal where the Canadian government raised the cost of tuition to public universities by an incredibly modest number of people? And it was either in Montreal or somewhere. There were 1 million people in the streets the same day. Why are we so passive here?
My favorite are the French. They have like a 30,
they're good.
They have a 35-hour work week, and they're going to change it to 34 and a half. The whole place explodes. Ingrid from Somerville says people aren't outraged because the propaganda is working. Enough people are buying into the narrative, which is making those of us on the other side feel helpless, plus misinformation about milk, COVID, 5G, sunscreen, and on and on and on.
Sunscreen, Marjorie's favorite topic.
Yeah, Lauren Carhassa thinks our country's full of lazy people who don't understand the larger plan. Even your discussion with Chuck Todd, the dismantling of private education by kicking non-U.S. citizens out. Part of a larger plan to install an autocratic government, which cannot be done until the democracy is dismantled.
Let's talk to Corey in Northampton. Hello, Corey. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that I think when you're asking an important question about why people who are outraged, who do feel the urgency, are not out there. And I think it has everything to do with U.S. grind culture and the lack of a social safety net. People do not have the time and the safety to take the space and risk that they need to take in order to be out on the street.
Can I tell you something?
That is a good point.
That is a really solid
Jim,
point.
I said that right before the segment.
I wasn't listening when you said it. I was listening to Corey.
People don't have time because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. And then they can't afford after-school care for their kids.
Right.
You told me that was ridiculous, Jim.
No, I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to someone. Corey, that's actually an excellent point. And so, but let me, for those who aren't dependent on the social safety net, who are outraged, as you said, Corey, where are they?
who isn't dependent on the social safety net? Are you talking about people who don't have jobs?
No, that's actually
don't need
you make wonderful points. It's an excellent point, Corey. Thank you for making it. Appreciate it. Call us again.
Okay, one of the texters complains we don't have enough Republicans on the show because if we did, we'd understand that there's some common sense and what's being done is truly for the good of the country. I wish this person.
By the way,
would
that
call.
point is irrelevant to our conversation today.
I know, but
we're not debating whether Trump's good or bad. A lot of people think he isn't good, so why aren't you doing something?
But I wish the person would call to tell me what is good for the country. I'm missing what is good for the country at this particular moment. What is good for the country?
I can answer that question.
What?
There are thousands of small businesses having to shut down. So at least we have a narrower choice, and it'll be less difficult to decide where to go.
You could say one thing that you have to give them, the people aren't coming over the border anymore, so you don't have to worry about people taking over buildings in little places all around.
I'm sorry, that's not fair. There was a solution proposed by Biden. He had to be dragged kicking and screaming, and it was killed by Donald Trump. So this all could have been done earlier, with far less cruelty. Donald Trump stopped it.
But I am open to what's being done good for the country.
Andy in Boston, hi.
Hi, long-time listener. I've called a few times.
Thank you.
I think a lot of the answers are definitely factors, but another one is our form of government. Many of the countries that you talked about where people are in the streets or were in the streets are parliamentary.
That's an excellent point, too.
They have a party that doesn't support their person. They're out. Liz Truss was out in a month in the UK.
British PM, yeah.
We've got 4 years. We've got 4 years till anything can happen. And I think a lot of people feel like, how do I survive? More than how do I fight?
You know, by the way, it's interesting you say that. You say 4 years. It's actually 2 years till the midterms. I know you're talking about the presidential election. But it's a wonderful analysis that there can't be snap elections, and that's a wonderful analysis. Andy, thanks for making it, and thanks for calling in. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. But I guess what I also should have said to Andy on the other side, though, is that's a rational response to why there's less action. I have an emotional response to almost everything that I think is a horrible threat, and I don't think most people like me stop themselves by saying, well, there's no election close enough for there to be a reaction to this, because protests often cause, look at Trump, by the way. The tariff changes are not because there was an election. I guess it's the other side of the Andy response. It was because there was a horrible backlash that he couldn't deal with, and he basically flipped. Taco, what are you making a face about?
Because it was the market and the bond market.
Exactly. And who does that have an impact on? Real people.
Yeah.
When the bond market gets upset, you know whose interest rates also go up? People want to buy a car and want to buy a house. The answer is his policies were a disaster for him, and he flipped. So there's that answer. Ryan and Quincy, hi.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Fine, thanks.
Good. So, this is something this has been decades and decades in the making. I mean, we're coming to the culmination of years and decades of American empire and people trying to get to this point of some kind of authoritarian takeover and of the oligarchical class and all that kind of stuff. But I really want to point out, a lot of millennials think that there's no point. I'm a millennial. A lot of people think there's no point in individual action. It's only going to do something if we change regulations, blah, 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 all that jazz. But we got to get real people out on the streets, and there's real people out on the streets doing stuff like volunteering for transportation equality, volunteering for environmental stuff, and people need to get it out of their heads that their individual choices do not matter. Your choice matters. The things you do matter. You need to get out there and support the things you care about.
Ryan, I love that call.
That was a great call.
I love that.
That was a great call.
Thank you.
And we should say again that there are these No Kings rallies set for June 14th.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of them in the Berkshires where we're broadcasting right now. So,
all over the country. Look at the map. If you go to nokings.org, you'll see little dots on the map that are everywhere. And again, I'm not disparaging. This is great. How long did it take to pull this thing together?
I don't know.
Months. What's the plan for June 15th?
Go back to Twitter.
I mean, I know you're saying that in jest, but that is part of the problem.
Or X, I should say.
You know what the most important thing to organize? I'm going to say, Marjorie's going to say, oh, you were an organizer. I'm going to say, when I was an organizer, when I was a union president, you know what the most important element in success is?
What was that?
Relentlessness.
Didn't you have some big rally when you were a kid that nobody covered?
No, let me tell you something. It's funny you say that.
Cardinal law shut you down.
No. We had this is actually true, and it's interesting you say this, because you know what the anniversary of was? Yesterday, Tiananmen Square. I led, when I was running a tax reform group, the single, and I mean this sincerely, I believe it was at the time the single largest pro-tax rally maybe in the history of this country.
That's right.
There were like 10,000 people in the streets of Boston to say, raise our taxes. And you know what happened? We got a half a paragraph in the Boston Globe because Tiananmen Square happened that day. And the only reason we got half a paragraph is because I called Kirk Scharfenberg, who was then the editorial page editor of the Globe, and said, we just had the largest rally ever on this cause. You got to give us something. So he gave us a middle paragraph. It was pathetic. It was one of the most depressing moments because it was almost like, as one of the organizers said to me the next day, if there's no coverage, did it even happen?
If a tree fell in the forest.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
That's too bad, Jim.
I was a large tree that fell in a Catherine but literally the anniversary was yesterday. It's amazing you said that. Catherine in Chelmsford, hi.
Speaking of a great demonstration.
What?
Tiananmen Square.
Oh, well. By the way, I have a photograph on my wall of the resistor who they've never identified, that
Stood
one
in front
young
of a
man
tank.
standing in front of the tank.
Yeah. Sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah, I agree with all the points that already have been raised, but I think there's also another important one. It's messaging, or the lack of messaging on the part of our Democratic leaders.
That's a very good point, too.
Jim, you just mentioned being relentless. I have subscribed, actually, it's been weeks now, I subscribed to Adam Kinzinger's Substack.
Mm-hmm.
He is relentless on attacking the Democrats on their lack of messaging. And he offers such good suggestions. I even wrote to my representatives the other day. I said, look, you guys should subscribe and listen to what he says and do it, because we need leaders. I mean, I've been out there at all the demonstrations. I'm going to the one on the 14th.
Great.
But, we need leaders, and we need, frankly, younger leaders.
Yeah.
More vibrant leaders.
Catherine.
And the messaging. And he has such great suggestions.
Like what?
Why
Like what?
doesn't somebody listen?
What are the suggestions?
Well, I mean, for example, like when there are recesses and Congress all goes home, he says the Democrats should not go home.
Yeah.
They have the legal obligation to grab attention from the they have to oversight. So they should go to for example, when Doge was doing its worst, they should go to some of these, agencies, demand that they be let in. And, it's an opportunity for the word to get out. We need some coverage, not just of the demonstrations, but also what they're doing. And frankly, they're not doing much.
By the way, we should say,
everyone,
Catherine, before you go further, people may not know who Kinzinger is. Former Republican congressman on the January 6th committee. He was brilliant, and obviously Trump targeted him. He decided not to run for re-election. The reason Marjorie and I are smiling at each other,
the gun demonstration,
is the Democrats did exactly what you wanted in summer of a bunch of years ago. They decided to do something I don't remember in my lifetime. They did a sit-in on the floor of the House of Representatives. We were celebrating on the radio, saying, even if you disagree with them, don't you love the fact that they're standing and saying, you know what happened? The July 4th holiday came. They called off the demonstration because they had to go home for the holidays.
Fireworks.
So there, Catherine,
yeah.
I mean, that's the relentless thing. Catherine, that was an excellent call. And Adam Kinzinger is incredible. I don't know about his Substack. People should check it out. We've had him on the show. He is really
I mean, the Democrats call out press conferences, and they make these statements at the press conferences, but they're not always that effective. I mean, I don't know. Chuck Schumer's not that inspiring to me anymore. I don't mean to criticize Mr. Schumer, but really, he's not going to be
Why don't you
leading.
name, as in furtherance of what the caller said, we see a lot. We have CNN on in the studio, C-SPAN occasionally. Tell me what the subject matter of the last press conference the Democrats did. It was on our screen. What was it about?
Markey does a lot of press conferences
No,
about
when
things
was that?
like climate.
When was that?
A week or two ago, wasn't it?
Okay, that's a rather feeble response. He does.
Yeah, he does.
What was the content of that? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Good. Okay, neither do I. Jamie in Granby, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm a new listener because I'm out in Western Mass.
Fabulous.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Great to have
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that everyone is welcome to come to these rallies, protests, standouts, whatever you want to call them, and they are happening almost every single day in a lot of towns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, I usually go to one on Tuesdays in Holyoke. We're on I-91 on the overpass, so people see us.
Oh.
They're also there on Thursdays sometimes. Friday in Belchertown, they have one every single week from 4 to 6.
I love this.
There's usually one on a Saturday in a close-by town. This Saturday, I'll be in South Hadley. So this is a thing that Jasmine Crockett brings up. It's called only ongoing outrage overcomes oppression.
That is fabulous.
And we are ongoing standing out, and it's not only fun, but you meet tons of other people with the same beliefs, and it's just been really great.
But Jamie, let me ask you a question. I always debate this.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better to have, 50 demonstrations with 25 people apiece in different towns, or is it better to have big demonstrations where everybody's not going to go to Washington, D.C., obviously. But you know what I mean? Because I've seen...
You do what you can.
Brookline
You do
has
something.
There have been people out there for 50 years in Brookline protesting something every weekend.
There's anti-war stuff every Friday.
And I don't get the sense...
But let Jamie answer the question. So what's your answer, Jamie?
Yeah, so my answer is we need both, because the bigger ones, we get more media coverage. Like, we know that there's going to be media coverage for June 14th, right? But for these little ones, in purple towns like Granby, where I am, the people need to know that there are people that feel the same way as them.
That's a good point.
So that they're not so scared. And the opposition, the people who, aren't on our side, need to see that we're here. And it both help is my answer.
Jamie, don't go away. Say one more time what Representative Crockett said. What was the line? That was great. What is it?
Yes, she said, only ongoing outrage overcomes oppression.
It's great. Hey, Jamie, call us again. Thanks so much for listening and for calling.
She's a pretty dynamic.
She's fabulous.
Leader. Tom in the North End?
Yeah, read it. You read it.
I live in the North End on the Freedom Trail. My way of protest is to apologize to French tourists in my high school French, ask them to send us another Lafayette, and please don't take back the Statue of Liberty.
That's a pretty good text there. Thanks so much. 877-301-8970 to text or to call.
Kim in Norton, thank you for calling.
Hi, Kim.
Hi. Nice to talk to you again.
You too.
I'm glad I'm calling after the last caller because I am dovetailing off of what she's saying.
Great.
My indivisible group is protesting every Wednesday night. We're rotating 3 towns. And sometimes it's a smaller protest, but it is about the visibility and about letting people know that they are not alone, and some people letting them know that they're supported. It's important, and we're out there.
Hey, Kim, thanks for making it 2 in a row. We really we appreciate that. 877-301-8970. A lot of people are texting about June 14th. I am in no way diminishing the importance of people rising up all over the country on June 14th. And you can find out where nokings.org. It's on the same day as the military parade on Trump's birthday in Washington. My concern is it took a hell of a long time to get there. And secondly, as far as I know, it's a one-day deal. And one-day deal, no matter how effective it is, and I hope it's very effective, doesn't do the trick. 877-301-8970.
Ann in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Ann.
Good morning.
And to you, too.
I'm a newbie.
Good.
I just hit the Mass border. I'm on my way home to Vermont. I live in Connecticut. And I went to school in D.C., undergrad and grad. Okay. So I've been close to the center and lived down there for several years. And it is a totally different environment. When you're farther away, people just are not as enraged as they should be. My parents were really conservative. They were John Birch Society folks. Oh. I mean, because that doesn't scare you. And I grew up, believing in our country. Second Amendment, okay, great. But, what are we doing? We are now moving towards just this unfathomable just form of government that is taking away everything that any one of us have fought for on various levels, whether physically in a war or marching and protesting. I went down to D.C. in March. I want to go in June because there's nothing better than to be in D.C. and locking arms with strangers and really, really wanting to change things. I'm really disappointed with Connecticut. I see nothing. I think people are lazy on top of everything else. My own son, well-educated guy, 34 years old. Oh, not that bad. No, we will be okay. I don't think so.
Well, we don't think so either. And thanks for the call. Good, safe commute there. She used an expression about taking something of ours away. I'm thinking, so if someone came to your house, you're sitting there, and someone stole something that you would help create, and they left with it, would you go to Twitter to deal with this, or would you try to do something to reverse it?
You know, based on the calls and the texts we've gotten, I mean, people feel that they can't say things that might get them in trouble with Donald Trump. American citizens feel that way. That's pretty unnerving. And I think certainly if you're not an American citizen, or if you're here from a foreign country going to school or something, you're not going to go to a demonstration.
I'm not minimizing that. There are a lot of scary countries, a lot of scary leaders where people have the courage to stand up. And by the way, with at least as of today, a much greater likelihood of being hauled off the street and sent to jail. And as scary as that is here, the prospect, it's not quite as extreme as it is in other countries. I think most of these things, frankly, are excuses. They may be decent explanations, but they're mostly excuses for inaction. And I admire the people. I don't think these small demonstrations are enough that people are calling about. But if the choice is between doing nothing or doing something in your community, good for them. Good for them for doing what they're doing.
Well, listen to this from Jen in Lexington. We've had 3 large marches so far with another on the way, saying it's not enough when people have already pivoted from one-time dramatic demonstrations with no follow-through to a growing movement of ongoing actions is defeatist and counterproductive. Cover the work, talk to movement leaders, stop putting down the efforts of those showing up.
Reverend Ken Langer is listening on NEPM. I am a UU minister in Barrie, Vermont. We stand in resistance on our church lawn in downtown Barrie every Thursday afternoon at 3. We get a lot of sneers and nasty comments, but we think it's important. Well, it is important. We're glad you're doing it.
And we forgot to mention the people that were protesting Hampton Field that got arrested. They don't want to expand Hampton Field so more private planes can go in there, causing a tremendous amount of pollution, and they protested and they got arrested. So they were doing civil disobedience.
I know we have to end this, but let me just say to the person who just texted, I would probably be texting the exact same thing, saying stop complaining about what isn't and celebrate what is.
The Hampton Field people are on the show tomorrow.
Okay, I know they are. What you're celebrating, and I celebrate it too, whether it's in Granby, that woman, or the texter a minute ago, it's not enough. I mean, it's just not enough. We should be real. Celebrate those who are acting, but acknowledge that even the collective action as of what's the day, June 5th, obviously is not enough. Look what's happening all around us every single 24 hours. Marcelo Gomes, just take one example. An honor student, beloved in his community, is still in custody.
But people are protesting up in Milford, and people protested in Somerville for...
it's great. It's great.
Osterk, the woman that got...
Did you see... We're going to ask Andrea Cabral in a couple of seconds, the former Secretary of Public Safety here. He needed a court order, from at least what I understand, to even be allowed to see his damn lawyer in the United States of America. An innocent honor student kid who was grabbed out of his car by mistake, ICE admits. I mean, it's just... But thanks for your call, and for those of you doing something, we really are inspired. Thank you for letting us know about it.
Okay, the show continues here in Boston, but we say goodbye to the folks up at NEPM, coming at 3 o'clock on the fabulous 413 on NEPM, ahead of the NEPM Asparagus Festival this Saturday at the Hadley Town Common. I love it. Monty and Khalees will do an on-air asparagus taste test. Doesn't get much better than that. Andrea Cabral, as Jim said, is coming up right after the new news. NPR TV critic Eric Deggans after that. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. Every story has its twists and turns, so let the PBS NewsHour set the record straight. Get all the facts you need from America's most trusted news source, weekdays at 6 on GBH2 and streaming anytime you want on the PBS app.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Hour 2 of BPR. The Trump administration is using tattoos to justify their deportations of immigrants, claiming they show gang affiliation. What about the federal agents doing the detaining? Do tattoos of Norse symbols of the afterlife mean they're white supremacists? We'll talk about the double standard, the absurdity of it all, with former Sheriff Andrea Cabral.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and Marcelo Gomes da Silva remains in custody. The 18-year-old Milford High student was taken by federal agents on his way to volleyball practice. We'll talk with former Education Secretary Paul Reville about this and Trump's latest attack on Harvard University. Plus, our Two More Things segment next on the second hour of VPR 89.7 GPH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The Supreme Court has unanimously sided with a woman in Ohio who says she suffered discrimination at work because she's straight. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports the ruling is expected to make it easier for members of majority groups to prove discrimination.
Marlene Ames had been working for the Ohio Department of Youth Services when in 2019 she was passed over for a new job in management. The position went to a lesbian woman instead. Subsequently, Ames was demoted from her job as program administrator, and a gay man was hired in her place. Ames sued, alleging discrimination because she's straight. The lower court sided with her employer, citing a legal standard that requires white people, men, and those who are not gay to meet a higher bar when bringing a discrimination case. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who wrote the opinion for the court, agreed with Ames that there cannot be different standards for different groups of people. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
President Trump spoke by phone to Chinese President Xi Jinping today. The two leaders discussed trade in a lengthy call this morning. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports in a social media post Trump sounded optimistic about what comes next, but the future of the country's tariffs remains unpredictable.
Trump posted that he and Xi spoke for around 1.5 hours, largely focusing their conversation on trade. China and the U.S. had tariffs on each other's goods of more than 100%. Before last month, the two countries agreed to lower their tariffs for 90 days while they sought a longer-term agreement. Currently, tariffs on Chinese goods are 30%, and China tariffs on U.S. goods are 10%. Trump added that U.S. and Chinese delegations would meet soon, but did not specify a date or location. All of this happens days after a federal court ruled that Trump's China tariffs, among others, are illegal. Those tariffs remain in place while the administration appeals the ruling. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
President Trump is banning or restricting people in more than a dozen countries from entering the U.S., citing national security concerns. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump says his signing of the proclamation fulfills a campaign promise to protect Americans.
The justification for such a sweeping ban was that the White House at least says the action was needed to protect the U.S. from terrorist attacks and that these countries lacked the right vetting capabilities. In a video statement, Trump actually cited the firebombing attack in Boulder, Colorado as an example of why this was necessary. That man charged with that attack is actually from Egypt, which is not among the countries listed in the travel ban.
That's NPR's Franco Ordonez reporting. Stocks on Wall Street are trading higher at this hour. The Dow was up 158 points. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Members of the state's large Haitian community are reacting to Trump administration's new travel ban imposed on Haiti and other countries. Teddy Mumbrum moved from Haiti to Massachusetts 5 years ago.
I think it's very horrible because I have friends, I have people, I have family who used to try to come with their visa. Since that they will no longer be able to come, it's horrible.
The former physician says economic strife and gang violence are making it impossible to stay in Haiti. Massachusetts has the third largest Haitian population in the United States after Florida and New York. Boston Athletic Association has announced that the 2025 Boston Marathon raised over $50 million for charities, surpassing the single-year record that was set last year in 2024. Today's announcement says the total combines funds raised through 176 nonprofit organizations in the Bank of America Boston Marathon official charity program, as well as donations and fundraising from those who participated in the race. Since the official charity program launched in 1989, more than $600 million has been raised. In sports, Red Sox open a weekend series with the Yankees in the Bronx tomorrow. The NBA Finals get underway tonight with Indiana at Oklahoma City. And the Edmonton Oilers took Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals last night. Game 2 tomorrow. It is hazy, hot, and Henry today. 88 degrees outside our studios here in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's going to be live at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. I'm so looking forward to this great performance from the stars, this young couple, these incredible voices that star in The Light in the Piazza, which is playing now at the Huntington Theater. Governor Maura Healey will be with us on June 25th. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're now joined on Zoom by former Suffolk County Sheriff, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us weekly when she's not filling in for one of us like she did last Friday. Hi, Andrea. Nice to see you. This is working well so far. Hi, let's try that again. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Perfectly
yes, we can.
now. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Good.
We can hear you now. Andrea, people in Milford have been extremely upset. Jim has done a lot of commentary about this terrible situation where this young man has been detained by ICE, Marcelo Gomes da Silva, who came into this country with his family back when he was 5 years old, and he's still in custody. Give us your analysis and updates.
Yeah, so this is an 18-year-old boy that ICE agents apparently mistook for his father, who, by what I can see from the video he posted, looks to be at least in his 40s. I don't know how they mistook the son for the father, but he was driving his father's car. They stopped him. He came here when he was 6. The family is originally from Brazil. And it's reported that their visas had lapsed. So they decided to take him into custody. They were actually looking for his father. They take him into custody. And he was literally on his way to volleyball practice. He's a junior in high school. And obviously, the community is very much up in arms about this. He's apparently being held at an ICE field office in Burlington, Massachusetts, where his attorney, a woman by the name of Miriam Conrad, reports that he has a fever. He's been sleeping on the concrete floor in a cell that holds a number of other adults. And so the issue is obviously due process. The Department of Justice filed a motion an emergency motion, and it's before Judge George O'Toole in the federal court. Most people are familiar with Judge O'Toole. He's been on the bench for a number of years, saying that they needed to remove him to a different facility immediately that is outside of Massachusetts, because they can't find a bed for him in Massachusetts, which, quite frankly, as a former sheriff and a former prosecutor, I refuse to believe that that's possible. I had ICE potential deportees when I was in Suffolk in one of my facilities. Don't tell me you can't find a suitable place for him to be. And Judge O'Toole has basically ruled that he is not to be removed from Massachusetts while these proceedings are pending. And it is also clear that Judge O'Toole intends to allow him, I think at 1 o'clock today, to have a hearing, be represented by his attorney, Miriam Conrad, and to afford him the due process that he hasn't gotten up till this point.
You know, that last point is what I wanted to ask you about, and I apologize for what is my apparent ignorance. My understanding, and let's start with this, correct me if I'm wrong, that Marcelo Gomes was not even able to see a lawyer until there was a court order permitting him to do that. Is that
Yes.
correct? So wait a second. I understand, I think, and anything I say, please interrupt me and tell me if I'm wrong. I understand you're not entitled, unlike in a criminal case, where if you're low income, you're indigent, you're entitled to legal representation. You're not constitutionally entitled to a representation here. You're nodding in agreements. That's true. But if you request representation, if you affirmatively request it, and you say, I want to meet with the lawyer who's been identified, who we have independently identified will represent me, you need a court order to see your damn lawyer? Is that what the state of affairs is?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I can tell you how I sort of internalized that when I was sheriff.
Okay.
You don't have, because it's a civil proceeding, you don't have a right to an attorney. You can request an attorney, and anyone who is interested in upholding the law, if you have an attorney, will allow that attorney to see you. It ought not to be the federal government of the United States, when someone has secured counsel, that is standing in the way of that person seeing their counsel, regardless of whether or not they are, by the letter of the law, strictly entitled to see it. When I was sheriff, I brought in an organization called PAIR, which represents indigent people who are facing deportation. And I allowed them access to the facility at Suffolk so that people could readily have access. But that was up to me as the sheriff to do that. I didn't have to do it. But your point is well taken. And these are circumstances steroidally escalated because of the numbers of people that are being, taken off the street, the mistaken identities, people who, not even the people who are they're looking for. They're not providing proof that people are here illegally, that are a danger to the community, that are members of these gangs. And so the due process issue is by an order of magnitude made more important because they are literally snatching people from their streets.
Speaking of snatching, there's this federal judge, Boasberg, who we've talked a lot about before, who is ordered that these migrants, I think it's roughly 100 of them, that were sent to El Salvador into that infamous prison, must be able to challenge their removals, even though they're currently in El Salvadorian custody. And this is, by the way, the same country where Abrego Garcia is, who Trump is supposed to facilitate the return of, and nothing has happened, nor has contempt happened. Could you explain exactly, what Boasberg decided vis-a-vis these 100 people, most of whom were not gang members, despite the government's original assertion, and two, how do they effectuate that right to due process when they're rotting away in a prison in El Salvador?
And third, it kind of say at this point, what difference does it make what Judge Boasberg has to say? The Supreme Court has already said this guy, Abrego Garcia, should be brought back, and nothing has happened.
So answer any and all those, Andrea Cabral.
Some of those are easier to answer than others, particularly the last one. So we've covered Judge Boasberg before, and as you mentioned, he's the one that originally ordered the planes not to take people to El Salvador to begin with. Basically, Tom Homans and the administration said, well, sorry, too late. They were over international waters. And the president of El Salvador posted this sort of taunting message on X that said, oopsie, that they were already in El Salvador and that. But then you also have Donald Trump saying publicly on one, maybe his social media platform, that or in an interview, I think, that he could bring them back if he wanted to, but he wasn't going to.
Right.
So that may be part of the answer to the last question that you asked, how did they get back? Clearly, the president says, I could bring them back. And he's the one in the United States of America that's not doing it. But for people who don't know Judge Boasberg, he not only has the bona fides of having been a federal district court judge and the chief judge of the District of Columbia circuit for a number of years, he was also appointed in 2014 to the United States Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. So
the secret court.
Yes, he's done FISA cases, but he also in 2020 was appointed to the United States Alien Terrorist Removal Court, and he's been designated the chief judge. So when he rules on things like this, it is not just with the acumen of a longstanding federal district court judge. He is particularly acute in his knowledge of alien terrorist removal. So when Trump said, I can send all of these people under this age-old Alien Enemies Act law, and Boasberg said, no, you can't. And that was one of the most recent rulings that he made in these Trump cases. He knows what he's talking about. He's very familiar with that particular act. So in any event, what he has done, and we talked about this, we've been talking about this for weeks.
Yes.
What he's done is he has certified these, it's more than 100, he said, in his ruling, he said it's at least 137. It's probably more than that. People who have been spirited away out of this country. And he said that he's certifying them as a class. We've been asking that question on this show for a long time. Why can't there be a class action? That is a very powerful mechanism for getting this done because it gives the plaintiffs the strength of the whole versus as individuals seeking due process. He has essentially made a ruling that says this due process claim ought not to have to be taken up one by one by one and work its way through the process. As a class, they are being denied their due process rights, and he's given the DOJ a week to respond as to how they're going to effectuate this. I would just want to say this one thing. I haven't had a chance to read the entire decision. But he starts his decision by quoting a passage, an excerpt from Franz Kafka's novel, The Trial. Yeah. And it is so apt. And I really do encourage people, if you can get a hold of this decision, to read it. It is absolutely, this is a Kafka, we're living in these Kafkaesque times, and the passage involves the protagonist being basically arrested and not knowing why he's been arrested and being told that the law seeks out injustice. And he says, I'm not familiar with that law. And a guard says, you'll become familiar with it. You'll become accustomed to it. You'll get it at some point. And he's right about that. And that's exactly what's happening here, that these federal judges who are adhering to the standards of the Constitution, the spirit of the Constitution, and everybody's right to due process and equal protection under the law are what is standing between us and a lawless administration.
Yeah, thank God for these judges. But again,
follow through.
When their rulings are ignored, it makes me a little bit less enthusiastic. I mean, Nancy Gertner, you said you had Nancy Gertner on a couple of weeks ago when I was on vacation, Jim.
Last week.
Well, she wasn't as worried about this, and maybe I shouldn't be as worried about it.
She was deeply worried. What are you talking about?
About the orders being ignored and no contempt of court?
No, it wasn't about being ignored. It's about the provision that's in the, quote, big, beautiful bill that would essentially strip contempt power. But she'll explain it next time she's on. You know, Andrea, I want to move to another area, and this is sort of a Zen-like question, so I'll try to put it as well as I can. Why is it, let me see how I do that. Okay, here we go. Why is it that a tattoo on an undocumented person is automatically proving that you're a member of a gang, yet a tattoo on a law enforcement, or let's say an ICE person, is automatically showing support for fallen soldiers rather than an identification as a white supremacist? And this came to a head, by the way, I'm assuming people read about this. One of these ICE people at Martha's Vineyard, remember the grabbing of 40 people, the vast majority of whom were just going to work on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket last week. One of the ICE agents had this tattoo that a lot of people think is a representative of white supremacy, and of course their position is just a tribute to our fellow soldiers. So do you have an answer to that question there, Andrea?
Well, I think your question is less Zen than rhetorical.
Maybe I meant rhetorical. That's probably better. Yeah, go ahead.
Because this administration is absolutely willing to overlook and, in fact, encourages and welcomes racism.
By the way, excuse me one second. We have a photograph. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want people to know, if you're watching the streaming or about to, the photograph of the tattoo in question is
right
on the screen.
Right above the skull.
I'm sorry, Andrea. Continue. My apologies.
Yeah, so you'll note that tattoo is exactly the same tattoo that Jacob Chansley, the shaman, the insurrectionist
on
shaman,
January 6th, right?
had displayed prominently on his chest, and it's well known. I mean, you can look up the ADL's website or any Southern Poverty Law Center. You will find a wealth of information about these kinds of symbols easily as well documented as any other type of gang symbol in law enforcement databases. So to your point, if the presumption is that having a tattoo like that means membership, affiliation, sympathy toward white nationalism, white supremacy, or racist ideology, why does that only apply when the person is brown? And that's why I said it's rhetorical. The question is rhetorical. What I will say about this particular story is you'll remember this because we talked about this a lot. Remember we talked about the study that came out, and it came out in 2009. Jennifer Granholm was the Homeland Security Secretary under Obama, and it found that there was this recruitment of white nationalists, white supremacists into law enforcement, into the FBI specifically, into all federal agencies and local police departments. The GOP in Congress at the time had a huge reaction to this, didn't want it to be released. And we were on the show saying, why are you so sensitive about the idea that there's a report saying that white supremacists are being recruited into law enforcement? Shouldn't you want them to not be recruited into law enforcement? And the Obama administration, to its discredit, backed off and weakened the release and issue of that report. And now, all of these years later, we're seeing some, in my view anyway, the fruition of that. How many people have been recruited into the ranks of law enforcement, are attracted to it because of the level of power that it gives. And we're now at the point where Pete Hegseth can have a tattoo that symbolizes white nationalism, and he's the Secretary of Defense. ICE agents can have them, and it's the immediate response isn't, I'm sorry, you never should have been made given this position to begin with. It's the immediate excuse. That's not what it is. All symbols start out as one thing, usually, and are co-opted by some group, later on for something else. So the notion that you can sort of say, no, this is just about our veterans, and as long as you say that, it's accepted. But you can't say that if you're an affiliated gang member, but you're brown. And that's essentially what's happening here.
This is just as an aside, but since you mentioned Hegseth, and we talked about this briefly yesterday, but I think it bears further mention. There's so many abominations constantly that I think it depends on the individual, what strikes at you. And it may not be the most important one in the grand scheme of things. I have not been able to shake this thing yesterday where we learned that he had stricken the names of civil rights leaders like Thurgood Marshall, like Harvey Milk, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Harriet Tubman.
From the names Harriet. So essentially, I will state the obvious, and my apologies to those. So if you are gay, of color, or a woman, or otherwise not a white man,
you're out.
You're out. I mean, and I know in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be a one-day story because there's so many other things that are, I guess, worse. But what kind of reaction did you have to that, Andrea Cabral?
Well, when I said it was more than a month ago, it might have been a couple of months ago, when I said that there is a full court push and press to effectuate the most significant re-entrenchment of white supremacy since Jim Crow. That was not hysteria. That is exactly what is happening here. And a big part of that, to make it a permanent re-entrenchment, is rewriting history. First, you have to erase the history that exists. Then you replace it with the history that you would like to see. And then you sort of, add water and stir and let that simmer until you reach a point in this country where there isn't a single generation that remembers the history that you erased. That's how you do it. And when I say Republicans in the GOP and MAGites or whatever you want to call them play the long game, they've been playing this long game for decades. It has now reached a sort of, an escalation point, a rapid escalation point. But that's what's actually happening. So to see that happen, to see these pages being taken down from federal websites, to your point, that essentially if you are not a heterosexual white male, there are no accomplishments that you've made to the progress of this country. There is nothing that you have done to help that happen. Your identity is being erased. Your history is being erased. which was a big part of slavery, was erasing the culture. People take strength from their culture. They take strength from representation, seeing themselves represented among people who make significant accomplishments to the country. You can diminish entire groups, whole races of people, by taking from them a sense of identity or a proper place in their country. That is exactly what is happening, and it's happening very deliberately, very intentionally, and as I said earlier, steroidally. It is on steroids.
You know, are you going to say, because I was
going to ask about Musk, but go ahead.
Well, since you mentioned the long game, we did this yesterday. This also bears repeating. There was a great film our colleague Michael Kirk made, one of his hundreds, at Frontline, McConnell, the GOP, and the court, talking about the long game and how McConnell, right after Bork was borked, and didn't get on the Supreme Court, decided, I'm going to dedicate my whole career. And he brilliantly did, alongside a guy who most people probably never heard of, Leonard Leo, head of the Federalist Society, who is now and even though we said this yesterday, probably is the greatest contributor to the greatest, and I put this in quotes, success in the history books for Donald Trump, the moving to the right for generations of the Supreme Court, is now a sleazebag and somebody who hates America. And I guess the point that Marjorie and I made yesterday, further proof, which apparently is never enough, that there is nobody who ever survives a friendship or a positive relationship with Donald Trump. At the end of the day, you're ultimately a sleazebag and an enemy.
Well, look at poor Melania. Isn't she living in Delaware or something like that?
I think by her choice, probably. But, Leo was a really effective, unfortunately, advocate for what, and made Trump acceptable to the hard right when he was a candidate, when he provided a list of judicial nomination names to show that he was really going to go for not true conservative, hard right conservatives. No,
you're right. But you always have to keep in mind that a couple of things. Trump is the face of this Trojan horse, right? So, just like they're using anti-Semitism to make people believe that that's the reason they're doing all of these things and going after these universities while they're hiring anti-Semites into the administration. So Leonard Leo's not stupid. The forces behind Leonard Leo. Why are you guys laughing?
No, because it's true, but it's so absurd.
Insane.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's true. Leonard Leo and the forces behind Leonard Leo are what prop Trump up. They know who he is. They know that he will turn on them. Leonard Leo, in his own way, is far more powerful than Trump. Trump, after this term is done, Leonard Leo has been around since he worked on Clarence Thomas getting onto the Supreme Court.
You're right. Yeah.
And the forces behind him, the money forces behind him, the forces that have given him bequeathed $1 billion to organizations that he controls, and then he doles out the money to extremist organizations so that they can keep running. Like I say, this is the long game. Trump is merely their imperfect messenger to get where they're going. So no one should feel as though having been called a sleazebag by Trump on a social media platform is going to diminish Leonard Leo's power or the power of what he's trying to accomplish in this country one single bit. The messenger will be replaced by another messenger. Elon Musk is being replaced by Russell Vought, who wrote chapters of Project 2025. Yeah. And so they've already gotten the people they want in the Trump administration. Yeah. They will survive the passing of Trump.
Vote is the budget guy, by the way, for those who don't know, for Trump.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrea, thank you, as always, your time and your thoughts. We should speaking of Musk,
he's
Donald
talking
Trump
about Musk now at the press conference.
In the Oval Office with the leader of Germany, and he was asked the question about Musk trashing the budget bill. Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. He's worn that hat. Trump was right about everything, and I am right about the great, big, beautiful bill, Trump said. I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody. He never had a problem until right after he left. And we haven't said this. We read the text yesterday, not text, the postings on Twitter from Musk. He did more since we spoke. He is relentlessly going after this thing, even though Chuck Todd told us he doesn't think it's going to have any effect. That's it.
Andrea, thank you again.
See you, Andrea.
Very welcome.
Bye.
We've been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us, and we're very glad she does every week. Okay, what is that?
That was what just popped up in my email, uninvited, was Stephen Miller giving his high school speech in his campaign for the presidency of high school, trashing the Latino janitors. And some things never change.
He started young.
He did indeed.
Okay, after a quick break, we're going to talk with former Education Secretary for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Paul Reville, who teaches at Harvard. We're going to ask him if Harvard is falling apart here, and if anybody's concerned that the United States leadership in science and medical research is threatened and we may lose our world leadership there. Also about education department cuts, what they'll mean for the schools around here. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In 2008, at the peak of the Great Recession, people started having fewer kids.
Which means 18 years later, right now, there are fewer students going to college.
This is known as the demographic cliff.
I'm Kurt Carapezza from GBH News.
And I'm John Marcus from the Hechinger Report. On our podcast, College Uncovered, we stand on the edge of the demographic cliff and take a look at how universities are dealing with this catastrophic problem.
Listen to College Uncovered wherever you get podcasts.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Boston Early Music Festival with opera, concerts, and more, June 8th to 15th. Featuring the fully staged North American premiere of Reinhard Kaiser's 1705 opera, Octavia, BEMF.org. And Gloucester Stage, presenting The Glass Menagerie. A son confronts the ghosts of his family's past in Tennessee Williams' iconic drama. Now through June 28th. Tickets available at gloucesterstage.com.
Welcome back to BPR, Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back at the library tomorrow. We're joined now in Studio 3 by Paul Reville, former Massachusetts Education Secretary. Wait a second. So we have him, Education Secretary, Andrea Cabral, Secretary of Public Safety. When will we have the rest of Deval Patrick's cabinet in? Is that tomorrow? Or in any case, he's the former Secretary of Education for Massachusetts, professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where he also leads the Ed Redesign Lab. Speaking of Ed Redesign, hey there, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, good to be with you, Jim and Marjorie, notwithstanding the circumstances.
Well, I know, and there was a guy that was the former head of the NIH on television last night, talking about the impacts of these cuts, these taking all this billions of dollars from Harvard on medical research, and that was such a scary thing because we lead the world right now, right? Medical research, whether it's pediatric cancer, whether it's adult cancer, whether it's heart, we lead the world. And he said, people think you can take this money away and maybe a year from now you get it back. So it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
You have to get all these patients.
Yeah, well, we've been at crossroads internationally.
Yeah.
And Harvard's been an incubator in this region. It's why we have Kendall Square or Route 128, and in conjunction with MIT, we've been international leaders in science and innovation and technology, and now that will go elsewhere. I mean, I was interested, last week they had that baby where there was some genetic engineering that went to eliminate a major disease that baby might have had. And they had an interview, actually it was on your network, with that gentleman who'd been involved in the research. And they asked him, are you worried about the Trump cuts and what it means for the research? And his response was interesting. He said, I'm not really worried about the research going forward. The research will go forward because people internationally are watching this. But I am worried that if we drop the ball in the U.S. is going to lose its leadership on this, and other people are ready to pick it up immediately and take the lead on this and any number of other projects.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to just be like a second-class operator in the world? I mean, that's what we're becoming. And I've said before, when there were advances, when I had that Aziz Shah that's going to be on the show with us, I think next week, wrote a piece about the Trump administration putting the kibosh on research on the bird flu vaccine.
Right.
And let's hope it never becomes a big deal like COVID. But if it did, I'd like to know that we had a vaccine. And selfishly, I'd like to know that we're going to get it first in America because we're Americans.
Well, this is the
that's all over
consequence
too.
of the kind of chainsaw approach to, fixing government that's been taken by this administration with no real awareness or anticipation of consequences, just going on impulse. And the impulse here seems to be to destroy Harvard and, by extension, to attack higher education generally. And in the short term, that will work. I mean, this is having serious consequences. And
we lead the world in that, too, but not for much longer.
Right.
Can we actually talk? We've mentioned about 12 times today what befell, is that the right word? Harvard and Columbia, at least according to Trump yesterday. Could you describe briefly what Trump did on the Harvard and Columbia front, Paul?
Well, they're two different things, really. But on the Harvard front, he's indicated that he's going to put a 6-month freeze on anybody coming here on any kind of a visa. So basically going to block. And it's not altogether clear. So a lot of these things I don't have all the details on. We have the headline of the threat because each day we get a new threat. So this was yesterday's threat, is that they're going to block anybody from any country, apparently, over the next 6 months from entering the country to come to Harvard.
And re-examine. He wants Rubio, the Secretary of State, re-examine existing visas of international students
and go through
who are already here.
Person by person. Now, last week it was they were going to go after Chinese students in particular and so on and so forth. The Columbia piece is somewhat different and something that he's been threatening for a while. Now he applied it just to Columbia. You know that institutions of higher education as well as high schools and K-12 have to be accredited, and we have regional accreditation associations, which are private nonprofits, but they're authorized to accredit institutions by the federal government. And so this administration is interested in setting up its own accreditation system. But in the meantime, what they're doing is asking that the accrediting association that oversees Columbia, which I think is the Middle States Association, drop their accreditation because of purported violations of this, that, and the other.
And what's the consequence of losing accreditation?
Well, the consequence of losing accreditation is disastrous because it means you can't receive federal funding of any kind, including and especially Pell Grants or student loans. So, it basically puts a gigantic hole in the budget of any university.
We're going to ask you the same question we've asked probably a dozen people in the last week, but since you're in the belly of the beast, not to mention your credentials going in, describe to me a high school kid or a graduate student who is thinking of coming to Harvard next year, who read yesterday's headlines and read the headlines from the days before, knows some things are pending in court. Describe that kid who, despite everything pending, says, I'm going to go ahead and my intention is to go to Harvard in the fall. Who is that? Who would take that risk?
Well, I do think there's going to be more perseverance on the part of some of our incoming students than we've worried about, because many of these students have worked hard for years to get the golden ticket to go to Harvard. And so they're not going to automatically relinquish it. But having said that, they're bewildered, particularly if they're international students. So it's a different proposition. If
I'm sorry. I was unclear. I meant international students.
No. I think they're confused. If you're in China right now, it looks like you're not going to be able to make it over here. And you've got Chinese universities saying, if you have an acceptance from Harvard or if you're already an enrolled student, we'll take you automatically. A couple of universities in Hong Kong have already said that. So, but again, people in China, this is really important and a very prestigious thing to be accepted in Harvard. So they're not going to give it up overnight. But right now, they're considering their options. Many of them may be looking to defer admissions in the hope that this will blow over in the next year and maybe they can get in the following year. I don't know how the university will respond to that. By the way, I don't speak at all for the university.
I understand that, of course.
I just speak for myself.
Let me just say two things, by the way, which I haven't mentioned in a while. I've been to China a number of times because both my kids were born there. Every time we've gone back, when we've asked friends there, what should we bring? Almost always on the request list is Harvard swag. It doesn't matter if they have any Harvard connection, any Harvard swag, T-shirts, sweatshirts.
No question.
Whatever.
I visited myself, and when I was Secretary of Education, you would have thought I walked on water because I was associated with Harvard.
That's pretty great.
Amazing.
So one more thing about the Harvard Columbia thing of yesterday is this is the first question that Marjorie broached with Chuck Todd, who was our first guest today, at 11 o'clock, and he immediately pivoted to the trickle-down effect on every university.
Sure.
Describe what's happening, because we're so Harvard fixated for one reason, Columbia fixated for another reason, because they were the first capitulator, which hopefully have learned they got nothing, including their $400 million back out of capitulating.
Fools of themselves for nothing.
So explain concretely, what is the trickle-down effect of these almost everyday assaults on the Harvards of America?
Well, of course, it depends which ones have staying power, which ones stick, notwithstanding court interventions, because, of course, they're overreaching and overstepping, legal boundaries here in terms of what they're attempting to do to colleges and universities. But the mere threat is enough to put fear in the hearts of people who work at these institutions or attend these institutions. So let's just take, on the research side, it isn't just education funding, it's research funding in the sciences and in the health areas and in technology. Yeah. And so if you're a faculty member and you have a lab at any university in the country, you're probably experiencing cutbacks in that. And not only would you be experiencing cutbacks in that funding, but at the same time, the amount of overhead that the university can charge for putting up the library, for the laboratory, for hiring graduate students, for all the support that you get if you have a lab, they've cut that drastically so that every university is going to be feeling some kind, any university that does significant research is going to be feeling some kind of impingement. On the Columbia case, Jim, that we talked about a moment ago, I mean, what they're doing is pointed at Columbia at the moment, but they intend to change accreditation generally and to replace the existing system of accreditation with accreditors that they authorize that will have the same kinds of values that they're attempting to impose directly on Harvard. So the fear of that is inspiring a lot of anxiety at universities all across the country.
One thing you didn't mention was the international student impact. My recollection is there are 1.1 million, I think, international students in the U.S. right now. Based on your conversations, your consumption of the news, what is that number likely to drop to in next year?
I can't predict a percentage, but there will be a significant drop. I mean, of course, in a place like Harvard that's directly targeted, so that they're going after people who attend our institution, we expect quite a significant drop, and are going to have to adjust accordingly.
Northeastern's got a ton of international students, too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But otherwise, I mean, there's going to be quite a significant impact. And, universities will attempt to adjust. They may put up remote programs to try and serve students who are elsewhere and do that. They may do deferred admissions to give people some breathing and themselves some breathing room. They may, if they're lucky enough to have an endowment, have to reach into their endowment to cover the hole that's in their operating budget that's caused by the loss of revenue from tuition. So it's a problem all over, and it's created great anxiety and I think trepidation in those who are applying now in the coming year to think about where they want to go to school. And it's to our advantage to have the kind of influence that we have, especially in our top institutions, public and private across the country, to influence young people who are studying and getting undergraduate and graduate degrees. And instead of viewing it, as this administration apparently does, as a threat that somehow we serve international students, this is threatening to the United States. So,
one last thing about the research. We all know people that have had cancer, and oftentimes when if it's a cancer it's fatal, it's an incurable cancer, they get in these drug trials, and the chemotherapy, the radiation that they've had to date is not working. Then they get in a drug trial. But you read these stories and hear about people who are, maybe they'll get another 2 years, another 4 years, another 6 years. These drug trials are going to be drying up. That's the other thing.
Well, they're not going to be. They are drying up.
Yeah.
I have a friend, not in a cancer trial, but in another kind of a trial, has a child in a trial, and it was just stopped abruptly. They were just informed overnight that she's not going to be in this trial. And this trial offered some significant hope to this child and to this family, and it's just without explanation, without any real reason, it's just shut off. And
by the way, if they'd like to talk to us, we would love, obviously they should make that decision. We would love you to reach out to your friend and say if they'd like to discuss what's going on with their kid and the treatment, we'd love to talk about that. But go ahead.
So, it's that kind of interruption, and it's across the board. For example, one of the factors that we worried about is our junior faculty who come to us and they're trying to develop their expertise and to gain tenure at their respective institutions, and they do research and they count on research grants that come from the federal government to do various kinds of research. Those are all being shut off. So if you're a junior faculty member, you're out of luck if you're at one of these institutions that's targeted, but even more broadly, institutions across the United States where research money is drying up. And where do they go? They're going to have to go internationally.
Who voted to get rid of drug trials? That's what I want to know. Right. I don't think anybody did.
I want to stay on higher ed one more minute.
Yeah.
Lee Pelton, former head of Emerson College, now head of the Boston Foundation, was with us yesterday. I was a bit surprised by the ferocity of his language about college presidents who have ducked their heads down. He used the word cowardice more than once, and he said that he thought it was really important that there be a collaborative response when one university is assaulted, like Harvard, rather than Alan Garber and Harvard and whatever having to stand on its own with its corporation or whatever it is. And again, use the word cowardice, not just for those who are not in collaboration with others, but directed at those leaders, and I use the term advisedly in this case, in higher ed who do not speak out. What's your reaction to the why, and why aren't they? Why isn't there a more collaborative effort, and whatever other reflections you have on that?
Well, I think things are cooking on that front in a variety of areas. So what you don't see at the surface right now doesn't mean that there aren't conversations going on. Initially, after Harvard's announcement and Alan Garber standing up in the way he's done, and incidentally, we had a wonderful affirmation of that at our graduation.
Yeah, we heard it was
week.
Pretty great. Saw some of the video.
That was terrific. There are a number of associations of university presidents or associations of colleges and universities have signed a petition backing the kind of stance that Harvard has taken, and are working in their own ways to, why aren't they speaking out? It's because Trump is attacking them where they live on their budget. And so it's an existential threat. So people think twice, particularly if they don't have the kind of reserves that Harvard has, about whether or not they're willing to run the risk of having substantial portions of their operating budget undermined. And that's what he's banking on. He's transactional in that way. He figures if he cuts off your money, he can bring you to the table and get you to do whatever they want you to do. And so, eventually the universities are going to be called upon to stand up. But many of them aren't in the spotlight right now. They're only indirectly feeling the heat. But the heat is going to be arriving all across the country, particularly if things like this, change in accreditation procedure happens, if these research cuts continue, if the assault on foreign students continues. We're going to have every institution going to have problems.
Dr. Paul Reville, now at Harvard, former Secretary of Education in Massachusetts.
So the Secretary of Education, that would be Linda McMahon. She's the one that was confusing AI sauce with artificial intelligence. Yes, steak sauce. She talked about, she was on speaking before the Senate Appropriation Committee talking about the so-called Big Beautiful Bill and the cuts to the Department of Education. The bill apparently includes a 15.3% reduction to the Department of Education. Is that a big deal, 15.3%?
Yeah, it's a big deal because it cuts into all kinds of programs that are being eliminated or consolidated. Apparently they're preserving the bulk of, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and Title I, which goes to low-income schools, and to the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Act. But they're going to block grant these monies out to states, which means, and we haven't seen the fine print yet, that the states can spend that money in any way they want. There are a whole variety of ancillary programs that are in support of IDEA, for example, or in support of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, but not part of the act, or administered separately. Those are being consolidated again into a block grant. So things like community schools or Gear Up or the TRIO programs that prepare and support people going to college. all kinds of special education services. Not necessarily eliminated, because that would be too controversial, but they're putting them into one bucket and then reducing significantly the amount of money.
Explain what a block grant is and what the consequence of it is.
Well, so a block grant means taking money that used to be what we call categorical, which is directly targeted for a particular purpose, where the government says, we're giving you this money, you have to spend it on these purposes. And instead saying, you can have this money and it's up to you to spend it on whatever you want. Or there are provisions in the law that say, broadly speaking, you must spend it in this area, but we're not going to hold you accountable for the way in which you spend it. So that leaves it open to a lot of mischief at the local level. In other words, you could have money that's supposed to be intended for low-income schools or individuals with disabilities, which if it's an open block grant, which I don't know the specifics of the language, if it's an open block grant, means they could spend it on anything. Yeah. They could spend it on just vouchers for everybody leaving the school system altogether.
By the way, while you're answering Marjorie's question over your head, CNN is mentioning that when Trump, at his press availability in the Oval Office a few minutes ago, was asked about the war in Ukraine, he said he likened it to, quote, 2 young children fighting like crazy in a park. That's how he describes what's happening. And the reason I was laughing when Marjorie asked you the question about Linda McMahon and her testimony about the budget, I haven't even said this to you. We've played maybe 100 times
the A1
the sound of her saying A1 when she meant A. But this is the part I didn't share with you. Because I wanted to laugh last night because I was depressed about the state of the world, I Googled that sound. And when I came up with Jimmy Kimmel in a monologue doing that sound, and after he plays the sound, he does what he does beautifully. He sends a reporter out to the street, and the reporter is handing small bottles of A1 to little kids and saying, this is for school. And so these little kids are like 8 or 9 years old. She hands them a bottle, and every kid is like, what?
Yeah,
what?
Yeah.
It's really
amazing.
It's really pretty. That's the Secretary of Education.
We have leaders who are out of their depth here, and eventually I think this will catch up with them. So, I mean, eventually, Harvard, for one, is determined to persist in this. Harvard's been around for nearly 400 years. The Trump administration hopefully is only around for 3.5 more years. And, it's going to do a lot of damage. Having a backbone is really expensive. And this is going to cause a lot of short-term collateral damage to individuals, to faculty members, to students, to our staff. But the university, it may have to shrink, it may have to change in order to survive these times, but it's going to go forward. And there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful that they haven't made fools of themselves like Columbia University has done. And my goodness, it must be awfully hard to be there now. I'm part of that faculty, I would think.
Yeah, they're really at risk now.
Claire Shipley, who's a former news person who was elevated to the presidency at Columbia in the middle of this.
No, I don't.
Yeah, again, a former colleague of our boss, by the way, Dan Lothian. And,
that's right.
The news world when she was, where was she, at ABC, or is that what it was?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where she was.
Well, I don't envy anybody who's in that position because you're really in no-win territory these days.
Did you ever think when you were Secretary of Education about providing 1 bottle of steak sauce for every child in K through 12? You never did? Why?
No,
I had narrow vision.
I lean more toward vegetables, Jim.
Well, it'd probably be great for the mystery meat you might get in.
Good point.
Have a little A1 sauce, make it taste a little bit better.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Paul Reville.
Take care. Good luck over there.
We have been speaking with former Education Secretary Paul Reville. He's former Secretary from Massachusetts, I should say, professor at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, where he also leads the Education Redesign Lab. Paul, thank you very much. After a quick break, just enough time in the hour for our 2 More Things segment. Jim is going first today by popular demand. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Ting Tang's newest album is a hard pivot from what you might expect. But the duo says they're grateful for the love people still have for their old music.
That's not my name. That's not my name. It's just constantly being used all around the world, and that makes it so we can make music that we want.
I'm Juana Summers. Hear more on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, Outliers author Malcolm Gladwell, and freed Russian political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza. bostonspeakers.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, live at the library tomorrow. It's time for Two More Things. It's our Two More Things segment. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Okay. Is sunscreen toxic? This is the title of the great Beth Teitel on the Boston Globe. UV truthers on the internet apparently think it is. This one truther wrote, children wearing sunscreen, the parent who does that should be guilty of child abuse. If you seed oils, apparently, Jim, are in processed foods are causing you to get cancer from sunscreen. Tom Brady, of all people, said hydration supposedly is going to prevent sunburn. You don't need any sunscreen. People think it doesn't prevent cancer. It causes cancer. It goes on and on and on. All these things. I just want to tell people, particularly who are a fair-skinned person.
Like you.
Yes, who grew up with no sunscreen, because we didn't know there was sunscreen when I was growing up. It really takes a big toll on you. If you want to be covered in these little red spots, there's a bunch of there are a bunch of cancers from skin cancer. Most of them are not going to kill you. The melanoma is a really bad one. But there are a lot of smaller ones that are really awful, like look like little measles on your skin. As you get older, you really don't want to have these red spots all over you, I don't think. Or you really don't want to have to go to the dermatologist and have them cut this big chunk of things out of your nose or out of your back or someplace else. And obviously you don't want to get melanoma, which is a really bad one. But the other thing is your good looks. When you get to a certain age, you look at the skin on your body that has never been touched by the sun, it looks like a baby's skin.
Wow.
You look at the skin on your body that has been in the sun and been sunburned over and over again. Well, what it looks like is crepey, crispy. It kind of hangs off your body in sheets. I don't think that's what you want. If I were you, I would ignore what the UV truthers say and slather on the sunscreen.
Wow, that was Surgeon General Marjorie Higgins.
That's right.
That was really incredible. So I want to talk about immigration and a little battle between the mayor of Boston and the U.S. attorney for Massachusetts. That's Leah B. Foley. So Mayor Wu is at this program at WBUR the other day, and she's saying people are, quote, terrified for their relatives and neighbors amid the ICE crackdown. I'm pulling this from a piece that was in the Boston Globe, by the way. Quote, folks are getting snatched off the street by secret police who are wearing masks, who can offer no justification for why certain people are being taken and then detained. Well, the U.S. attorney responds and says, we will not apologize for doing our job. And then she says this.
Federal agents and their children are being threatened, doxxed, and assaulted. That is why they must hide their faces. Furthermore, suggesting that federal law enforcement officers are, quote, snatching people off the streets is also false. It's offensive to the men and women who risk their lives every day to uphold the rule of law.
Well, and the fact that it's true. So here is Wu, who doesn't give up. She responds to that. She says in response to Foley, Boston cops do their work every day, this is a quote, without wearing masks, displaying their badges publicly with body cameras that document the interactions that take place with full transparency because we know we have nothing to hide. I don't know of any police department that routinely wears masks, says Wu. We know there are other groups that routinely wear masks, like, for example, neo-Nazi groups like NSC 131. Good for her. And by the way, we had Andrea Cabral in here a week or so ago who was saying we're going to do everything we can to stand up to the excesses of ICE, but we have limitations on our power. That's true, but the obligation of public officials, if they don't have formal legal power, is to stand up strongly like Mayor Wu did against the outrageous behavior of these ICE people in New England.
Don't you think average police officers face retaliation?
That's her point. Exactly.
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. These guys going around, their faces covered from right under their eyes, no badges, no nothing.
I'm with you.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, NPR TV critic Eric Deggans joins us to talk about all these great shows to watch this summer. Some of them I've never even heard of. And he's going to rank the best performances in 2025. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
It's because of listener support that we're able to bring you trusted news from NPR. Your gift can also be doubled thanks to our Matching Gifts program. To find out more, go online to gbh.org/matchinggifts.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Romeo et Juliet, a fresh take on Shakespeare's timeless tale with breathtaking choreography and live music by the Boston Ballet Orchestra. On stage now through June 8th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. And Dean and Hamilton with Compass Real Estate in Cohasset, a sponsor of the South Shore Art Center's 70th Annual Arts Festival on the Common, June 13th through 15th. Learn more at deanandhamilton.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of VPR. NPR TV critic Eric Deggans joins us with his must-watch list for the summer, including Pee-wee as himself, plus CNN airing Good Night and Good Luck, the Broadway play starring George Clooney, live on their channel. It's all about CBS News in its heyday with Clooney as Edward R. Murrow, as compared to CBS News Today on bended knee to Donald Trump.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then everybody knows Thursday is my favorite day of the week. Am I the a-hole day? This week revolves around a woman who brought a mini fridge into the office only to put it under lock and key to ensure coworkers can't steal her food or stink it up with her own nasty leftovers. Who's the bigger jerk? Weigh in next, our third hour, BPR 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. President Trump says he was surprised by the sharp criticism from tech billionaire Elon Musk of the massive tax cut and spending package backed by the White House. The president spoke to reporters in the Oval Office just a short time ago.
I've always liked Elon, and it's always very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill, because the bill is incredible.
In a post on social media, Musk mocked lawmakers for cutting electric vehicle and solar incentives but keeping oil and gas subsidies intact. He also made a crack, saying there's never been legislation in history that has been both big and beautiful, adding that, quote, "Slim and beautiful is the way." The Supreme Court has ruled that the Mexican government cannot sue U.S. gun makers for violence carried out by its drug cartels. The decision stems from a 20-year-old law that gives the American gun industry broad immunity from the harms that firearms cause during criminal activity. NPR's Meg Anderson reports.
The Mexican government argued before the Supreme Court that U.S. gun makers have helped supply Mexican drug cartels with firearms. A 2005 law shields the American gun industry from these kinds of lawsuits. But Mexico said the firearm manufacturers, which include Smith & Wesson and 6 others, knew about the illegal trafficking of their products, and that gave them grounds to sue. The court didn't buy it. In the unanimous decision, Justice Elena Kagan wrote that Mexico's complaint does not plausibly allege that the gun manufacturers aided and abetted sales to Mexican traffickers. 70% of firearms recovered in Mexico in recent years came from the United States. Meg Anderson, NPR News.
A U.S. private aid group distributing food in Gaza says it's reopened 2 of its sites after pausing operations following deadly shootings near their centers. NPR's Carrie Kahn reports from Tel Aviv.
According to a statement from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, the temporary halt in food distribution was due to, quote, maintenance and repair work. Nearly every day since the newly formed group of U.S. contractors began distributing food, deadly shootings have occurred near their sites. Israel's military says troops have opened fire on groups of people straying from designated routes. The International Red Cross and other health officials report dozens of Palestinians have been killed near the sites. The UN Iran says Israel continues to change security restrictions and authorizations on their trucks and personnel, greatly limiting the amount of food and supplies getting into Gaza to, quote, a trickle. Carrie Khan, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down a point. This is NPR.
Good afternoon with the latest from the GBH Newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. House Republicans on Capitol Hill have blocked an attempt to force Elon Musk to appear before Congress to explain what Democrats call his reckless tenure overseeing DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency. Massachusetts Representative Stephen Lynch, who's the acting ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, led the charge during a hearing today. He argued that Musk's 130 days at the quasi-governmental agency will continue to have devastating consequences for America for years and possibly decades. The Hill reports that Republicans who control the committee briefly suspended those proceedings to give GOP lawmakers more time to arrive and vote against Lynch's measure. After a tough season, the Bruins have found a new head coach. Yippee! GBH's Esteban Bustillos has more.
The Bruins are announcing that Marco Sturm will be the 30th head coach in team history. Sturm spent about 5 seasons in Boston as a player and was most recently head coach for the American Hockey League's Ontario Reign. He also served as head coach and general manager of the German men's national team from 2015 to 2018. Sturm succeeds Bruins interim coach Joe Sacco, who led the team through most of last season after his predecessor Jim Montgomery was fired just 20 games into the campaign. Esteban Bustillos, GBH News.
Oilers over the Panthers last night, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, 4-3 in overtime. The NBA Finals get underway tonight. It's Indiana versus Oklahoma City. 90 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We want to mention to you we are live at the Boston Public Library tomorrow when the stars of The Light and the Piazza will perform for us. They have got unbelievable voices. It's at the Huntington right now. You don't want to miss that. Mayor Wu, the mayor of Boston, will be with us on June 17th, and Maura Healey, the governor, will be with us on June 25th. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Here with us via Zoom and talk about the latest and greatest in the world of TV is Eric Dagans. Eric, of course, is NPR's first full-time TV critic, incoming night chair in journalism and media ethics at Washington and Lee University. You can also subscribe to his Substack, and his book is Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. Eric Dagans, good to see you.
I feel like a conglomerate.
You are a conglomerate. That's why.
That's right. That's right. Great to
See him
talk.
here. Get him there.
Great to
I'm just
talk
trying
to
to make a living, folks.
That's fine.
It's great to talk to you again, Eric, about some of these great TV shows. Let's start with, people know that CBS News is in some trouble now. People have been resigning from 60 Minutes, talking about pressure from the ownership. Sherry Redstone, who owns Paramount, she wants to make a deal, make a lot of money. So basically they want the station to kind of lay off Trump a little bit, to knuckle under to the president. So in that context, we're seeing Easy on the Eyes. George Clooney is going to be on 7 o'clock on CNN playing Edward R. Murrow. So tell us about this.
Live.
That's right.
Live, yeah. So this is an interesting experiment that they're doing. Good Night and Good Luck was a film that George Clooney directed that was about Edward R. Murrow, who's one of the most legendary newsmen in TV journalism and particularly at CBS. There was a period in his career where he confronted Senator Joseph McCarthy over, his fraudulent accusations that people were communists and using that to demonize people, particularly political enemies. So Clooney decided, a different person played Murrow in the movie, but Clooney decided to develop a stage show version of it for Broadway, and he plays Edward R. Murrow on stage in this production. And it's prescient for our times because the theme of the story is principled journalists standing up against government overreach and unfair, demonizing of political enemies by the government. So CNN has decided to air the second to last performance of this show, which, by the way, I think has become the most profitable show on Broadway.
Big hit.
It's been a huge hit, and it's a tough ticket. And so, it's to, in a way, I think it's to George Clooney and the rest of the production's credit that they are willing to make this production available to people who can't get to New York or can't get the ticket or can't afford the price. They can watch it on CNN. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they pull it off. I think I've found, as someone who's watched a few of these Broadway shows presented on television, it's really hard to create a TV event that mimics what it's like to be in the theater.
Yeah.
The best one I saw was Hamilton on Disney Plus, and the way they did that, they almost filmed it like a movie. They didn't just put a bunch of cameras and film a live performance. They had a whole involved production that was much more like filming a movie. So I don't know what this experience is going to be like for viewers, but I think the material is important, and I also think it's important that CNN is presenting it to the public at a time when we have a very vindictive person in the White House who is not above targeting people that he thinks are creating art that criticizes him.
Yeah, you're just mentioning the material for a second. I don't know how it's going to translate also to the television screen, obviously, because I haven't seen it. But the ability for the viewer to compare who are following current events, William Paley, the head of CBS News at the time, and how he ultimately supported Murrow versus Sherry Redstone, trying to essentially sell her news department out for $500 million or whatever she'd make should there be the merger with Skydance.
She doesn't have enough
It'd
money,
probably be a lot more than that. But what's interesting to me is I don't cover TV news as much now because that's David Folkenflik's job. But years ago I did cover TV news a fair amount, and I got to meet Don Hewitt, who was the founding executive producer of 60 Minutes, and spend time with him in his office and talk to him about journalism. And one of the things that he liked to say was that 60 Minutes. He was joking, of course, but he said 60 Minutes, helped kill journalism by showing that it can make money. And at a time when Edward R. Murrow was doing what he was doing, which is a previous generation beyond Hewitt. Hewitt worked with him, but he was a very young producer when he worked with him. TV news was considered something that you did because it was your responsibility as a broadcaster. It was a lost leader. It was not expected to make money. And so you didn't necessarily have the same commercial pressures on news operations back then that you have now. Nowadays, news operations are expected to make money. They're expected to present material that will galvanize an audience and that advertisers will gravitate to, and that will be ultimately fit into this whole matrix of other media platforms that these big media companies own. The company that owns CBS News, also owns Paramount Plus, also owns CBS, the entertainment network, also owns a range of cable channels like MTV and VH1. They have a bunch of different interests that can be affected by a news operation that regularly puts up stories that angers the president and draws pushback from the federal government. And so back in Murrow's time, journalists saw their duty as reporting the news and trying to get at the truth and trying to disregard those commercial concerns. And they weren't even necessarily expected to be a good part of the business. They were expected to go out there and do that public service, which was reporting journalism. So I think the other thing that's important about Good Night and Good Luck is that it reminds us of that time, before TV news was expected to turn a profit.
Remember, and by the way, for those who are relatively new to the current CBS News scene, it's not just Paramount and CBS News, it's Disney and ABC News, where they cut the deal off the George Stephanopoulos comments, another case that most legal people thought had no chance of prevailing, but they wrote a check to Trump for whatever, $15-16 million. We're talking to Eric Deggans, NPR's TV critic.
Okay, we're going to ask you in a second why you found this Mountainhead show so triggering. I was enraged watching this thing, even though I love Steve Carell, who is one of the stars.
Local boy.
Well, should we start with a little sound?
Yeah, let's play sound.
Yeah, we got a little sound from Mountainhead. This is this story that's supposed to be about these really, really rich, these guys like Elon Musk. I guess one of them is.
They were
supposed to
thinking
be
of calling
Elon
it
Musk.
ketamine head, by the way. Do you know that? And they decided not to.
He said that. I want my cell service to still work. He said that.
Okay. They're these tech titan bros off in this incredible house. Here's one of the many infuriating moments from Mountainhead where these guys realize they may have amassed enough power and unleashed enough chaos to start a new world order.
The streets do not look good. This is really bad.
Could be cool.
It could be cool.
It could really be turning into a moment.
Mm-hmm. In terms of
where it all comes out. All of the f***ing hatreds, all this resentment, like a slightly gnarly, but eventually highly cathartic draining of all this poison. Historical, ethnic, racial, religious. It's a great turning of the wheel.
I think that's why I'm so excited about these atrocities.
No, sure, they're exciting.
The fiat currencies wane, the blockchain prevails. Thank you. Are we the Bolsheviks of a new techno world order that starts tonight?
Do tell us.
So yeah, we should explain. So Mountainhead is this movie that was done for HBO that it debuted on HBO last Saturday. And it's created and directed by Jesse Armstrong, the same guy who created Succession. So this is a story of 4 tech moguls who decide to get together for a poker weekend. And when they get together, they realize that the richest of them has created a social media platform that is fomenting all kinds of chaos in the world and allowing people to create deepfake videos that are impossible to distinguish from real videos. And it is fueling sectarian strife across the world. And instead of being horrified by what's happening, they're all trying to figure out how they can make money through it. And one of the other moguls, who's played by Rami Youssef, has an AI program that would sort of rein in this social media platform and help people figure out which deepfakes are actually fake. And so, of course, the richest guy, who seems to be sort of a thinly veiled version of Elon Musk, allegedly. Don't sue me.
That's right.
Don't sue me. That guy wants to buy the AI from the other guy, and that's one of the subplots that is going on. But what comes through here is the way in which these tech titans assume that they are somehow better people than everyone else in the world simply because they're insanely rich. And yet, as they sort of bounce off of each other and talk to each other, in the same way that you saw in Succession, you see how human they are, you see how stupid they really are, you see that what they are is really good at the one thing that makes them money, but that doesn't necessarily make them superior people. But what you also see is a real lack of responsibility, a real lack of any sense of accountability for the negative effects of utilizing their power. And it certainly feels like we are kind of stuck in that reality right now.
Yeah.
But Eric, Musk and Doge, and you look at Meta and Facebook.
I read Marjorie reference your comment about triggering, but I think I got this right. I remember your review, I think, of the final episode of Succession, where you said something like it gives us, an insight into how these undeserving, mega wealthy types control the world. And I sort of feel the same way about Mountainhead. I understand the triggering, and I'm not sure we need any more insight into how the unworthy, wealthy, the Musks of the world lead the world. But it does, I think it presents, from my limited viewing so far, a pretty good picture, don't you think?
Well, I mean, it certainly feels authentic in the way that Succession feels authentic. I will say that, this has been said before, when Succession's episodes were rolling out, again, that was thought to be a thinly veiled look version of the Murdoch family. At least they were a prime inspiration of the family at the center of that show. That members of the Murdoch family were calling each other and highly skeptical of each other. They thought someone in the family was leaking actual stories to the writers from Succession because those plots were so close to how they were actually living their lives. Now, I don't know that is happening in the case of Mountainhead. I don't feel that level of authenticity, to be honest. But for me, the ultimate story of Succession is that these people have all this money and power, and they are extremely unhappy. And it is almost like they're living in hell. And in the end, the way the show ends in particular, you get the sense that almost every character it has been thwarted. They didn't get what they wanted. They are stuck in a personal hell, even though they have privilege. And if they could only understand that they need to improve themselves as people rather than chase this, wealth, they would be so much better off. That seems to be the message of that show. When you watch Mountainhead at the end of it, those characters don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Those characters wind up in a position where they're all more wealthy than when the weekend started. This alliance between the two tech bros that I talked about at the beginning seems to come together, even though they tried to kill each other when they were in the house. Literally tried to kill each other when they were in the house. And the sense was that the chase for wealth and power overarches everything. And they all sort of, there's one character, Steve Carell's character, I think feels left out and feels as if he didn't get what he wanted. But every other character did. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, you talk about, and you said the same thing about White Lotus. Is it criticizing this excess, or is it celebrating this success?
Well, and what I've said about White Lotus too is this idea that wealth, it corrupts all, but it is inevitable. And the only thing you can really do is either accommodate it, gain it, or get out of its way.
Yeah.
Now, you can argue that that's true. You can argue that we're living that life right now, and I would say that's an incredibly valid observation. But do I need to watch a TV series that is telling me that message episode after episode?
Yeah.
No, I do not. And I would hope that people who are watching these shows and think that there's some sort of critique of wealth also understand that there's an extra message there, which is kind of saying this is inevitable, and no matter what you do to resist it, you are bound to fail. And that is the element of the story that, I'm sure some people would dispute. They may say the White Lotus is not saying that. To me, it feels like it's saying that. And I don't want to feed that message, and I don't want to support it. And I would prefer that we create art that encourages people to reject that kind of wealth. Because ultimately, if you can't win against it, then what's the point of opposing it? And I've always felt that art has a powerful ability to motivate people and change their thinking. And I would prefer not to support those kinds of ideas.
Talking to Art Daggins, obviously from NPR, about TV. Speaking about people who've spent a decent part of their life in hell, Pee Wee Herman, new documentary, HBO, Pee Wee as himself, streaming now. Here's just a little piece.
Guess what? I'm having a party, and you're invited.
It's weird to be in this situation having a documentary made because I'm used to having control of my alter ego. I wanted to be a performance artist. I could show you my characters. Out of nowhere, Pee Wee Herman popped out of me. The audience ate it up and went crazy.
You know what? That's Paul Rubens, who the real person is. I sometimes I read something that somebody writes, you in this instance, and I think I thought this a long time ago, and I'm not sure if I ever thought it, or you made me think I thought it. I know that wasn't very clear, but I'll tell you what I'm talking about now. You mentioned
we are not responsible for this chaos.
Okay. Let me try to put it another way. Pee Wee Herman, I was really into Pee Wee Herman, and I thought, how come I don't know anything about Paul Rubens contemporaneously? And you wrote that in your piece. And so, again, whether I thought it or not, it is clearly true. And so why did he decide to sort of out himself in his final days here?
I mean, literally out himself.
Oh, right, a good point,
He
yeah.
talked about his sexual orientation. Well, what I love about this you could call it a docuseries. It's in 2 parts. I think it's considered one film in 2 parts, however you want to talk about it. What I love about this documentary is that it works on so many different levels. One of the things that the director is very plain about showing to you is that Paul Reubens was conflicted about opening himself up to the director and was constantly pushing to have more control over the project. He wanted to be there when the director interviewed other people about him. He wanted to be able to ask them questions, and he was constantly challenging the director for control of things. So there's him, there's Paul Reubens, the man fighting, pushing for control of the project. But what was really happening was that Paul Reubens was trying to decide how much he wanted to reveal of himself, period.
Yeah.
And when you watch this, if you know a little bit of the backstory, he died years before it was completed. And he had given 40 hours of interviews to the director, but then suddenly and inexplicably cut off contact. And then the director heard that he had died. He had been suffering from cancer for years and hadn't told hardly anyone in his life, including the director. So I think there was, and then the director found out that Reubens had recorded, the day before he died, he had recorded a voice memo where he talked a bit about why he might have done the film. And I think there was a sense that, he had these widely publicized arrests. He was arrested in an adult movie theater in Sarasota in 1991, and then he was arrested
for exposing himself theoretically.
The police claimed that he exposed himself in an adult movie theater. He always denied that happened. And then he was arrested in the 2000s by police who said that he had child pornography. He had a vintage pornography collection, and he always maintained that they mischaracterized some of the images from his collection. He always basically denied the substance of both charges against him, but felt like because he had created this alter ego, and everyone knew the alter ego, but they didn't know Paul Reubens, then when people heard the real life guy got arrested on these charges, they immediately believed the worst. And it bothered him through the years that he felt there were so many people out there who thought he was a pedophile and thought that he was a sexual deviant. And so I think one reason why, probably the main reason why he wanted to do this docuseries was to show that was not true and tell his story. But the director, I think quite wisely, told him, you can't just do a film where you say I'm not guilty of this stuff. You have an incredible story of an artist who built up this alter ego and very successfully kind of created a character that the world fell in love with and was able to have a private life. And it worked until it didn't. And that's a much more compelling story, and that's the story they ultimately told, and that's why it's so amazing, because it works on all these different levels. And if you're watching the very first clip where, it starts with Paul Reubens talking to the camera and kind of messing with the director a little bit, and if you know going in that he died before the film was finished, there is a poignancy to all of it that you really feel when you're watching it.
Eric, you wrote a great piece about your favorite TV performances in 2025, and one of them was this Noah Wyle, if I'm saying his name right, that stars in a new show called The Pit. I'm going to play a little sound from this, and then for people that haven't seen it, you can tell us about the actor and The Pit. Here's sound from The Pit where you'll hear Dr. Robbie, that's Wiley, welcoming new doctors to the ER.
As you can see, we have some new faces with us this morning. Good morning, come on over. Welcome to The Pit.
We got 2 traumas from the T, 5 minutes out.
Okay, copy that. Actually, this is the most important person that you're going to meet today. This is Dana. She's our charge nurse. She is the ringleader of our circus. Do what she says when she says it. As you can see, our house is always packed, and our department is mostly clogged up with boarders. Those are admitted patients waiting for a room upstairs, sometimes for days. Beds are a very precious commodity around here, so please be quick and efficient with your workups.
We only have a couple of minutes, by the way.
Yeah, just tell us about him and
so
the
this
show.
this is a great drama. It takes place in real time, so it's 15 hours in a brutal shift. Noah Wiley plays the top doc in an ER in Pittsburgh, and while he's working there, they have a mass shooting event, and they have to treat all these people who've been shot by somebody who they suspect had been a patient at the ER and then left. And it Noah Wiley does some of his best work. The doctor is hanging on by his fingernails already. He's traumatized because he had to, one of his colleagues, a mentor of his, died of COVID, and he had to, in that emergency room, and he had to sort of supervise that. And he's still recovering from that when all of this happens. And he has a kid in his life who he sort of views as kind of a surrogate son. His surrogate son's girlfriend gets wounded and she dies. He's not able to save her. And there's a moment when he just kind of loses it. And, I've had people who work in the medical field who've watched this who've said, it feels really authentic. And they really did a great job of, recreating what it feels like to work in an emergency room. It is different than ER, which is another show that Noah Wiley starred in, years ago. That was a huge hit on NBC. This is much less about the intricacies of the doctors' lives and very much more about what happens when they're in that ER and they're interacting with people. And, everything from a parent who is wrongly convinced that they know more about medicine than the doctors because they read all this stuff online or these conspiracy theories online, to a woman who has a baby in the ER, and of course that mass casualty event. It is really compelling, and Noah Wiley does some of the best work of his career. If he's not nominated for an Emmy, I would be shocked.
Yeah, let me just say this, though. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm sure he's great.
So you'll weigh in anyway.
I read your list. No, I'm going to weigh in by saying what we discussed this last month with you. He may be great, but he's no Uzo Aduba.
Oh,
let
God.
me tell you.
She was great.
Uzo,
we don't have any time.
Uzo.
If you've not seen
and if
The
she's
Residence,
not nominated for an Emmy, I am going down to the Emmy Academy and staging a sit-in.
One of the great
performances.
performances.
Amazing in The Residence on Netflix.
And I think just also The Residence is fun. It's not.
Huge.
It's really fun, and a lot of us need something that's fun in this
You
particular.
also get a sense about what's behind the scenes.
Yeah, you do.
In the
But
White
it's
House.
just
That's
a
great.
it was. I think it was based on a book that was about how the people who staff the White House, the cooks and groundskeepers online, and rather than do like a straight up drama or something that's like a documentary, they decided to make this really funny.
Oh, it's great.
Whodunit, which is just kind of amazing. And I mean, Al Franken's in it. All these amazing actors, and there's even a poignancy to this because originally, basically the head usher in the White House gets killed, and they have to figure out who killed him. The head usher originally was supposed to be played by Andre Braugher, but he died during production. And Giancarlo Esposito had to take over the role, and so there's even and there's a dedication to Andre, in the if you look in the credits. So there's even a poignancy to it because Giancarlo had to pick up a baton that was originally carried by Andre, and he does an amazing job. You would never know that they had cast another actor in the role. But given Andre's amazing comedic work on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you always got to wonder, man, what would he have done with another really, really awesome part?
Hey, Eric.
We love talking to you.
Such fun
Take
to
care.
talk to you,
Talk to you
too.
soon.
Thank
Be well.
you so much, Eric. We have been speaking with Eric Deggans, TV critic for NPR, incoming Knight Chair in Journalism and Media Ethics at Washington and Lee University. His terrific book is Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. You can also find Eric Deggans on Substack, ericdeggans.substack.com. Deggans, by the way, is Deggans. Eric Deggans at substack.com. Coming up after a quick break, a woman is sick and tired of getting her lunch stolen at the office, but after buying and padlocking her own personal refrigerator, her colleagues have started to make comments. It's time for another edition of Am I the A-Hole? You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Am I the A-Hole? You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Never fall. The Ting Tings' newest album is a hard pivot from what you might expect. But the duo says they're grateful for the love people still have for their old music.
That's not my name. That's not my name. It's just constantly being used all around the world, and that makes it so we can make music that we want.
I'm Juana Summers. Hear more on the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Boston Ballet, presenting Romeo et Juliet, a fresh take on Shakespeare's timeless tale with breathtaking choreography and live music by the Boston Ballet Orchestra. On stage now through June 8th. Official tickets at bostonballet.org. And Burton's Grill and Bar, offering catering for events from corporate meetings to family gatherings, with customizable meal options available for takeout and delivery. burtonsgrill.com.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. Forgot my first name briefly. Streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back at the library tomorrow. On June 17th, the mayor joins us for an hour at the library. The governor joins us for an hour at the library on June 25th. Welcome to the only reason Marjorie shows up at work here. Am I the a-hole? Till the top of the hour, we want to know, what lengths would you go to ensure your coworkers, your poor, hungry colleagues, don't get one measly morsel of what you've brought to work for lunch? We're extending a conversation we touched on the show a few days ago about office kitchen etiquette. Here's the situation which Marjorie's staff found on Reddit. A man works in an office with about 10 people. They share a kitchen, and over the past month, he's had his lunch stolen allegedly 5 times. I know what you're thinking. 5 times? It's not even that much. This 34-year-old man feels differently. To protect his food, he's gone ahead, get this, and bought his own personal refrigerator, which he keeps under his desk, locked shut with a padlock. The move has not endeared him to his coworkers, who started making comments like, quote, "Don't let him see your lunch. He might lock it up," or "We get it. You're special." The number is 877-301-8970 to call or text. Has this employee waded into a-hole waters by isolating his own food from everyone around him, or is he justified going to whatever lengths necessary to keep his lunch from the grubby claws of an inconsiderate bunch of coworkers? Meaning, are they the a-holes? Again, call with your opinion at 877-301-8970. Marjorie, why don't you go first? Who is the a-hole?
The a-hole is clearly there are multiple a-holes. Her fellow office workers that are calling her weird and selfish and paranoid because she doesn't like the fact that they stole her sandwich or her homemade prepared meal, not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, but 5 times, Jim. 5 times in 1 month.
So wait a second. Let me just be clear. The a-holes are the people who saw things in the refrigerator and took a bite. Is that what you're saying?
They took the whole damn thing.
Okay, fine.
They snatched her. She brought in like lasagnas.
She can't answer
that
my
she
question
brought in
because she knows she's not right. Okay, you know who the a-hole is? The a-hole is the person who bought their own refrigerator, put it under their desk with a padlock. Let me explain what the whole point of this is. I tried to explain this the other day.
Excuse me for a second.
No, office refrigerator.
Who do we know
Yeah.
that bought, whom do we know, I should say,
Whom do
that
you
bought their own little red refrigerator for themselves
I have
and
no
put
idea.
it out in the hallway?
I have no idea.
Jim, it's 15 feet away from me. You did.
Oh, that thing. That's a little tiny refrigerator. Okay, what is your point?
Well, I don't know. So are you the a-hole because you bought a little tiny
wants to come in
refrigerator?
and use that, they should feel free not to. In any case, here is my position on this. Okay, so one small inconsistency. The office refrigerator, you may not understand this. I'm going to try to explain
you explain it to me,
Okay,
Jim.
good.
Thank you.
The office refrigerator is a metaphor for life, Marjorie, okay?
It is?
Yes. It is is the world a dog-eat-dog world? Yes or no?
Yes,
Literally
it is.
in this
Yes, it
case.
is.
Yes, it is. Okay. Every person for themselves. You learn how to get along by how you cooperate within the confines of the office refrigerator, not by being selfish and not only buying, I don't padlock that refrigerator, by buying your own refrigerator.
It's in our own little cubby
putting
here. You
it
wouldn't
under
have a
your
reason
desk.
to come in
I don't
here.
hear you complaining about it. Putting it under your desk.
I got my milk
and
in there right now.
padlocking the refrigerator.
I moved your coffee out.
Okay, so fine. So Marjorie believes the a-holes are the people who stole this guy's food 5 times in a week. I believe the a-hole is the person who doesn't figure out, let me talk to them and see if I can work something out.
She did.
But
She did.
Rather.
How do you know it's a he?
Because it says he. That's how I know it's he.
Oh, I didn't see
that. Rather than buying your own refrigerator, and it's like a little kid who takes their bowl and goes home.
Okay, this person, I still think it's a woman. I don't see the he part.
Well, maybe
was telling people, they mentioned in the group chat at least a couple of times, hey, somebody's been taking my lunches, please stop. And they just kind of ignored it and sent vague messages like, oh, that's terrible, or some people are the worst.
34-year-old male, it says in the beginning. It's a man.
Okay, 34-year-old man.
No.
All right, you're right. It's a man.
Okay.
This man is still entitled, when he's making these homemade meals, putting them in the office refrigerator, probably with his name on it, 5 times in 1 month. He probably is a great cook, and everybody's going to take his meal. I think it's really weird that somebody would say, "Oh, you're special," or "Don't let him see your lunch; he might lock it up," kind of thing.
Okay, well.
And by the way, though, this is something I hadn't thought of.
What is
this
it?
is from a texter.
What?
I'm going to say the fridge person is the a-hole. This person is with you, Jim.
Yeah.
If he is being trolled this bad by so many people, there must be a reason.
Exactly. Now, here's an anonymous texter. A metaphor for life. So you're okay with stealing, Jim, time for a Wawa lie detector. And I repeat, I refuse to take the lie detector at the Wawa supermarket on the University of Pennsylvania campus, not because I had stolen any food, but because I was the assistant manager and was told they're going to lie detect the staff, and in solidarity with them, I resigned.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Well, neither did the regional manager.
It was just a segue from stealing lunches to stealing things right off the supermarket shelves at the Wawa supermarket. Listen to Gary in Wisconsin. Everybody knows you don't get retribution on lunch thieves by providing a fridge they can't use, but by baiting them with a tuna sandwich that sat under a hot lamp for 12 hours. Oh, my God.
Can I ask you a question? The padlock alone, don't you think that makes this person the a-hole? It's one thing to have your own refrigerator and put it under your desk, which is pathetic. What's more pathetic is he padlocks his refrigerator.
Jim, except when we're at the library, when we get the food at the Newsfeed Cafe, which is wonderful. You come in here with like 4 Tupperware things. You've got your overnight rolled oats with the bananas. You've got your special noodles from this place that you bought. You got the leftovers. You've got like 9 things.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how you'd feel if somebody came in and wiped out your 9 things? Not once. Not twice, but 5 times in 1 month.
Yeah, I know exactly.
You would go insane.
No, exactly what I would do. I've thought a lot about this.
What would you do, Jim?
I would go to the people at Solon and say, could we sit down and discuss this? I understand your need, and I'm trying to appreciate your need.
I don't think so.
Okay, let's take some calls.
I don't think so.
Who is the a-hole? Marjorie believes are the people who stole this guy's lunch 5 times.
Yep.
I believe it is the selfish, small-minded man who has bought his own little refrigerator, put it under his desk, and bought a padlock on it. Let's go to Tom in Hopkinton. You would be first on BPR. Welcome. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Hi. Excellent. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello to you.
Yeah, a long time listener, couple-time caller.
We're glad to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. You guys are wonderful.
Thank you.
I agree with the guy locking his lunch. I think it's his property. Yeah, he probably is a little strange.
Yeah.
I personally had, not personally, but a friend of mine in the 90s in a corporate environment, a female friend of mine, kept having her milk stolen all the time. So at lunch, we found a colorless, tasteless, odorless liquid laxative, and we put it in the milk. And it mysteriously stopped after a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And we kept looking for who was running to the bathroom as the culprit. And like I said, it was a big corporate environment. Her name was Sheila. I don't even know if she's around anymore, but she was a friend, and this is how we retaliated. And I think if it's your property, you have the right to protect it.
Wow, Tom, that is a well thought through. Excellent story-connected call. Thank you.
Chris from Fall River goes the laxative route as well.
People do that to other people?
I guess they do.
Here is what Ralph from New Hampshire says at text. Jim, just an hour ago, you, hypocrite, asked if somebody stole something from you. Would you just complain on Twitter? No, take action, like protest or buy a fridge for under your desk. That is an excellent point to which I can't respond.
That's very good.
877-301-8970 is the number.
The coworkers in gym are the a-holes. In this economy, no one can afford to finance other person's lunches. The person had to buy their lunch when she lost it. That's from Carla in Seattle.
We don't know. First of all, we don't know that that person had to buy their lunch.
Well, what are you supposed to do? You're expecting your lunch, and you're going to get hungry.
What would you do? Can you think this through a little bit? If someone stole your lunch, what does a normal person do besides buy their own refrigerator?
Gets upset because they had been looking forward to eating that particular thing for lunch.
Marjorie,
wonders who is dishonest among their coworkers that would do something like that.
No.
What do they do, Jim?
You steal someone else's. Thank you. I mean, really. Stephen in Warwick, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hey, how you guys doing?
I think we're good.
Long time, first time.
Oh, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
And I love you guys. You remind me of the country couple that was like fighting over the butter, like back in the 80s on that commercial.
That's
so
right. That's right.
Love the banter. So yeah, the whole topic you guys talked about this the other day. I tried to call in. It's such a big topic. I worked in fancy hotels. My first day was like literally looking at the refrigerator, being like, "You guys are all disgusting," and clearing it out and making like a timeline of things like, okay, I put like a bomb sticker, like, okay, in 5 days you got to get rid of this kind of thing. And I've had my boss even take someone's salad after a couple of days. She's like, "Oh, this is a nice little salad." And it was like a Mexican-themed salad. She's like, "It's like a fiesta." I'm like, "You're eating someone else's food. What is going on?" Like, it's so ridiculous, like, what goes on. Like, what? I don't even understand the politics of the refrigerator, but I totally understand. But I don't know who the a-hole is. I think it's obviously, don't eat other people's food.
Exactly.
Well, Steve, before you go, because you're so well thought out, one of the things I said the other day, even if you don't think you should eat other people's food, do you not think there's a statute of limitations? If there's something that looks really good in the refrigerator, and let's say it's 72 hours, and whoever brought it in hasn't eaten it, don't you think it's public property?
No, I do not. That's actually disgusting at that point.
Thank you.
Like, that's too long to eat something later. So, like,
not for me.
I don't know. And then, we've had like even like company parties, and then they're like, "Oh, there's some stuff left in the fridge," and then no one ever cleans it up after. So it's like been in there for weeks. It's like, oh, this cool stuff that's nasty now.
Stephen,
just clean up.
Thank you. That was an excellent call. Didn't Chelsea, who now runs the culture show, used to run our show, didn't Chelsea find was it a ding dong or something like this that had been in the newsroom here for like 15 years that was perfectly fine? Was it?
Because it was so well preserved.
It was a Twinkie. Thank you, Jamie. And it was fine.
The food preservatives.
Because there's no food in it, right? It's not a real...
When I was at the Herald, there's somebody retired, and they had the desk had a great location, so I figured I'd go over and take over the desk.
Yeah.
And when I opened it up, there were like maybe 20 sandwiches in the drawers that he left in there over the years.
How were they?
Tuna fish sandwiches.
You didn't eat them?
And ham sandwiches. And,
no?
Oh, God.
Ham sandwich could last for months. No, unrefrigerated. It's ham. It's not food. It's like a slice of ham.
Okay. Tammy in Bradford says Jim should recuse himself from this debate, having been ratted out for his personal fridge story. There you go, Jim.
I do. By the way, it is not really.
Do you have a lock on it? Lisa in Rockport wants to know.
There's no way. I tried to get a lock on it, but I did. There's no way that I didn't buy.
Did you try to get a lock on it?
I tried to buy one with a lock. But
You're an ass.
It's like $30. Oh, actually, this is a guy. Mr. Pillow called in before we didn't take his calls.
Yes.
Mike Lindell. He was really upset about the coworker who bought himself a fridge and a padlock. And here's what Mr. Pillow had to say about it.
Now you're an ass. You got that? You're an ass.
Exactly. So, I mean, the guy's got strong opinions. We just didn't feel we should have him on the show.
And here's the woman that Eric Deckens mentioned to us.
Yeah, when Eric and we were done before, Eric continued. He heard what Marjorie said was coming up next, and he quickly said to us that this comedian, Maria Bamford, we should check out, right?
Yes, and here is Maria Bamford talking about office drama.
I love the drama of The Office.
Don't touch Donna's labor maker.
Okay.
Don't even look at it.
Why?
Because she bought it with her own money.
Enough said, sister. Wait till Donna keep her mitts off my freaking tape dispenser. She knows it's mine because it's clearly labeled with my name.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, people in the office, they steal other people's stuff, like scissors and staplers.
Yeah, there's one scissors in the whole newsroom for like 200 people. I don't know if people are aware of that. It's a dog-eat-dog kind of thing. Let's go to Bob in Oklahoma. Hey, Bob, good to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the rest of the office staff is the a-holes. Because, I mean, I don't know about this man's dietary needs, anything.
That's right.
Oops. Oh, Bob, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so we lost you halfway there. Who are the a-holes again?
The
thieves?
Staff.
Who?
The rest of the office staff. The people who are upset that he has a refrigerator.
The thieves. And why do you think
Can I
that?
quick story?
Sure.
Well, because I have dietary needs. I'm diabetic.
Okay.
So if someone's taking my lunch,
that's right.
Then what am I eating?
That's a good point.
Good point.
Then the other story is we had the IT department banned, the company I used to work for banned personal refrigerators, and the manager of IT came down to me in our department because I was over the IT processes and said, hey, we noticed your administrative assistant has her own refrigerator. She needs to get rid of it. And I said, I'll back you up 100%, but you got to tell her where to store her breast milk now.
Oh.
He went away.
Boy, Bob, you have a hell of a bunch of stories out there in Oklahoma. Thank you for the call. Call us
Bob,
again. We
thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Is it okay, Jim, for someone to choose someone else's jacket in the coat closet? If not, then what's the difference?
Can you steal somebody's coat jacket? Yes. Yes, you can. First of all, I mean, if you've never taken an article of clothing, by the way, this is another statute of limitations
Okay.
thing. If the jacket's been sitting there for like a year,
yeah,
you don't think it's okay to take the borrow the jacket at least 10? You don't think that's okay?
Well, you don't have to worry because
Okay,
obviously.
fine. Okay, fine. That's really inappropriate
It would not be a
behavior.
jacket large
Okay,
enough.
fine. Okay, I heard you the first time. I didn't hear you the first time. I know what you were thinking. Can you, by the way, I just realized this. You've never raise your right hand. When
Taken
I'm
a jacket?
Excuse me, raise your right hand. Have you, I'm
Taken
Marjorie.
a jacket?
I'm talking
No,
to you.
I have
I'm
never
Marjorie.
taken
No, I'm
a
not talking to you.
jacket.
I'm
Okay.
Marjorie Egan.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
Have never taken a morsel of food out of the refrigerator that was not mine. Exactly. She can't do that because it's not true.
I think what I've done.
Thank you. Thank you all.
If there's like a cake in there, like if it's a big,
And what do you do?
If it's a big cake,
Yeah.
I might take a little piece of the cake.
And are you aware, I know that in particular instance, that was a child crying at home. The child, because the slice that child wanted for her birthday, it was her ninth birthday, by the way.
It had the little decoration on it.
Exactly.
And a little heart in the top, and I took it.
Let's go to Paul in Hyde Park. You're on Boston Public Radio. It's Who is the A-hole Day here on Boston Public Radio. Hi there.
Good afternoon, guys. I'm a
Hi,
long-time
Paul.
listener,
Thank you.
first-time caller.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't agree with politics a lot, but I tell people, they go, "What do you listen to those guys?" I go, "Intelligent dialogue."
That's right.
They get real quiet.
Wait,
So-
both of us or just one of us?
No, both of us. We
Oh,
actually need your opinion as a lawyer, Jim.
Oh, thank
Years
you.
ago, we worked at a manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
And there was the prodigal owner's son who was like on the Horrible Bosses movie, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So every day at the beginning of the summer season for work, people were finding periodically their lunches were missing. They thought they were going crazy at one point.
Oh, wow.
And we finally figured out who it was.
What was it?
So one guy was the nicest guy you'd ever meet. He took it upon himself to go out to the back of this manufacturing facility, which is no longer in existence.
No.
And there was a pigeon coop of pigeons, and
That's why it's
with
called
pigeons
pigeon
go
coop, yeah.
droppings.
Yeah.
No.
So,
No, that's-
anyways, he took it upon him. You can do the math on this one.
No.
He took it upon himself to get some samplings of their whatever.
Yeah.
And he put it into the egg salad sandwich that his mother had made for them for the day. He put it in the refrigerator, and like clockwork, the sandwich went missing. So as the guy was sitting there lamenting he didn't have his lunch, and they're all sitting at this big picnic table, they all looked at each other because they knew mischievously what had happened, and they said, "How was that sandwich? Did you enjoy that today?" And he goes, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He goes, "My egg salad sandwich." He said, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "Well, I'm glad you didn't take it because I put all kinds of bird, XXX."
Where was this,
And the kid
by the
went
way?
nuts. She was screaming.
This is brilliant
I thought
strategy.
it
Where
was-
is this?
They were inside the actual manufacturer. The Atlantic Plow building over in Hyde Park.
That is a.
So
there's more to this? Go ahead.
There's more to the story.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
We're not
going anywhere.
Is the sad part. I'll make it quick. The sad part of the whole story I'm getting to. So, anyways, the kid went on and put a big scene on and was ranting and raving, and his father came out of his office and came down the hallway and said, "What the hell's going on out here?" And the kid was going on and on, still ranting and screaming and whatever. And he would, meanwhile, if no one had told him, he would be none the worse for worse. He would have just ate it and digested
Why
it.
not? Yeah.
So he said, "Well, sir," he said, "Sir, your son every day has been stealing people's lunches for about 3 weeks now."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "What?" And the father looked at it, very upset, looked at the son, and he said, "You what?" And he smacked him off the back of the head. Not horribly, but he tapped him off the head. "What the hell's wrong with you?" So he don't ever do that again. He turned and went down to his office. Well, that was on like a Tuesday, right? Come Friday afternoon, the person that had perpetrated this, the
perpetrator,
he came down and said, "I'm sorry, work has been slowing down. I'm going to have to let you go."
Oh,
I feel bad.
He won the battle, but he lost the war.
I guess he
But there was
did.
no more food stolen.
Paul, that was an excellent story.
I hope he got
Thanks
another
for
job
sharing
soon,
that.
Paul. Did he get another job
Oh.
soon? We don't know.
He cleans pigeon coops, actually. That's what he's. Do you know that my first job
Thank
in
you, Paul.
life was at Old Doc? This is a true story. My first job I ever got paid for.
Oh, the pigeon coop.
Old Doc Flynn
Old Doc
was next
Flynn.
to where I grew up,
Next
and
to
I
where you
cleaned
grew
the
up.
pigeon coops for Old Doc Flynn.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
And you know what they also did? This is a horrible way to end the show, but
It's
is
not going to
true.
be a terrible pigeon story, is it?
Yeah,
Don't
how
tell.
they-
No,
yeah, how
don't
they
tell
kill
it.
a pigeon?
No, don't. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Can I draw it
I
for
got
you?
enough to feel terrible about. No,
Really?
I don't want to know.
Oh.
Somebody says you should ask yourself, what would Donald Trump do? And whatever Donald Trump would do about the sandwich, then you would do the opposite.
Can I tell you, Donald Trump has 11 mini fridges under his desk in the Oval Office.
Remember you had that
all
big
padlocked.
that big taco thing for Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo, we
Cinco de
call it.
Mayo.
Very nicely
mispronounced. I'm
pronounced,
sorry,
yeah,
but
thank you.
sitting there with that big, huge.
No, I know. Oh, he did. Yeah, on the airplane.
Yeah, no,
That
it
before-
was singing some
Oh,
office.
his
wasn't
office.
it?
His office, yeah.
Yeah.
Jared, before we get to whatever we're talking about here, you just sent me a text. The other day we were talking about the problem with the French press, which Marjorie has, which does make the best coffee. As I said, the second cup is always cold,
Yeah.
and you allegedly have a solution?
I do.
What is it?
It's the Fellow French press. I bought it about 3 months ago. It's a little bit pricey.
OW?
Yeah, and I think I heard at one point some of the RISD grads are
Designed
among
it?
the designers. But yeah, it solves the French
keeps
press
it
problem
hot?
because your second cup is as hot as the first.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
And how does
fantastic.
it do that?
Just because it's insulated.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
it's
Excellent.
brilliant.
The Fellow.
As I say, it's a little pricier, but I'll have it for the rest of my life.
Now,
So who cares?
Do you have a padlocked mini fridge under your desk in the newsroom?
No.
Do you ever steal anything?
Never.
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 When you're hungry?
I can do the whole thing you just did with Marjorie and hold my hand up and I'll do all that. Never.
Never in your life?
Never.
You see, that Jared is a good person.
I can raise
He's
my
a
hand
good
and say,
person.
I haven't done it in a week.
Yeah.
Because I haven't been in the newsroom
We have
in a
about
week.
10 listeners who have Ex-Lax people, though. They have Ex-Lax people who stole their
Put it
lunch.
in
Can
milk
you
or the
imagine
food.
that?
Somebody did that to me once in our old building, and they took a pizza that I had in there. It was what Marjorie was saying. I was so looking forward to it, and then
You
it
do look
disappeared.
forward.
So I put a note on the refrigerator. I said to whomever stole my pizza, I will share with you the communicable disease I have.
Oh, that is really,
Yeah.
really
You know-
I did.
overboard. That's a
Secret
bit
spoiler: I
much.
didn't have a communicable disease.
I figured you
Stealing
might not.
pizza, which most people love, including myself, that would be the ultimate. You're looking forward to it. I know
looking
some people don't put it in the microwave because they say it makes it too soft and mushy, but I always put mine in the microwave, and the cheese
You know
melts
the best way to
again.
heat it?
In the oven.
Cast iron.
Cast iron?
That's the key to everything these days with me. Cast iron pans. That's the way you do
It won't
it.
heat the top, will
No,
it?
well, yeah, the environmental heat heats the top. Yeah,
Oh.
it heats the crust beautifully and whatever.
And you put anything in the pan? Or
What?
Just heat
yeah,
it
a
in the
little
pan?
bit of oil.
What?
A little bit of oil. A little bit of oil. You don't have to, but a little bit of oil. Okay, what's on the show?
Oh, but and can I also tell you that Twinkie is still upstairs?
Is it really still upstairs?
I just saw it the other day.
So it's like 20 years or whatever.
It's about 20 years, and it actually has discolored slightly over the
Is
last
it in a wrapper?
couple of years.
Your wrapper, it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, they've ruined Twinkies.
I'm
They
going to
used
go
to
eat
be
it
great.
right after the show.
They used to have cream in the
What's on
middle.
your show?
We're
Quickly.
going to be previewing our class, a New York lauded play that's coming to town, presented by Igor Goliak, and he's the director. It's Arlequin Players Theater, and then Al Wilson, the man behind Beyond Walls, using the arts to reinvigorate communities like Lynn.
Oh, great. Terrific. We'll be listening. That's 2 minutes and 30 seconds away. Jared Bowen of The Culture Show. Good to see you, Jared. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jared Bowen. And thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can check out our TikTok page, which actually is quite good at Boston Public Radio.
Good.
Tomorrow, it's very good. We're at the Boston Public Library, Wall Street Journal's Callum Borges and GBH's Adam Riley for our media analysis segment, Press Play Plus. We're going to have a great live music segment this week. Two of the lead singers with the Huntington Theater Company's production of Light in the Piazza. They're great. And we'll speak with Axios business reporter Dan Primack, I love him, on some of the lead protesters against the expansion of Hampscombe Field in Bedford. I guess they got arrested, Jim, several of them.
They did?
Yeah, civil disobedience at its best. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Ed and Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claw Parker. Patrick Lally ran today's live stream. Thank you very much to Patrick Lally. And thank you also to our executive producer, Jane Bologna. Stay tuned for The Culture Show with Jared Bowen. He was just here. He would never steal anybody's sandwich.
Nope.
He's going to come on right after us. I'm Marjorie Egan.
Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. And boy, it's a beautiful day out. I hope you can enjoy it. Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the law firm of Davis Malm, committed to protecting your intellectual property, one idea at a time. Learn more at